Sword of Coming Chapter 935. Zhou Xian in the soil. On the top of the mountain, a golden-armored man with a sword in both hands slowly opened his eyes. The of the mountain monarch, his real name travels around, and the name of the god. Howren Zhuzhou mountains and rivers in the world's first mountain god. Zhou Yu looked at the Xianxia swordsman who was standing thousands of miles away. Not far or near, this person happened to be on the border of Beiyue with a rebel by his side. Zhou Yu frowned slightly, thinking together, the dream shattered, and there was a faint sound of cracks in porcelain between the heaven and the earth. Zhou Yu looked at the green-shirt guest in the distance and asked, "How did you do this?" After all, forcibly dragging a Middle-earth Daoist mountain monarch into a certain dream state, even the peak cultivator of the ascending state could not do it. What's more, it is not a fun thing to do this kind of activity when it is full. Of course, except for the real fire dragon in Luzhou Beiju, and did it twice. The first time was the proof of the real fire dragon from the fairyland to the ascendant realm. He once sleepwalked the Yu Hoodoo. The second time was that the old was completely boring, using the rhetoric of the Hulong real person. It is the poor way, and the poor, you can't afford an intercontinental ferry. The young hidden official looked sincerely and said, "If you are sincere, then you will have the same strength?" The burly golden-armored man took a deep breath, chuckled, raised one palm and patted the hilt with his palm. His mother is very familiar. It couldn't be more familiar because it sounds like an old scholar. Zhou Yu and Qin Pingon have actually met many times. The last time I participated in the Confucian temple discussion, the two sides did not have a word. The young hidden official seemed to have a guilty conscience, and he didn't dare to get close to this great Zhou Xian god. After all, for the first time being a guest at Zhou Xian, Qin Pingon was still a silly straw-shoe boy. He once broke through the prohibition on Zhou Xian's landscape with a sword and committed a disrespectful act. Because of this incident, a lot of suspicions from the monks at the top of the Middle-earth mountain were provoked. After that, the ancestral temple received a lot of letters inquiring about the matter, and traveling around was too lazy to reply. Is it true that the invincible person in the Qingming world left by Yujing and traveled far to Zhou Xian with the sword? Or those old sword immortals from the Great Wall of Sword Qi and Zhou Xian turned their old accounts? Speaking of Howren's native swordsmanship, who would dare to act so presumptuously and want to go to Gongdalan to eat prison and read sage books? In addition, there was one time, but the two sides did not meet, because it was Qin Pingon who was forced to come here to meet with the Holy Master. At that time it was not appropriate to show up when traveling around so as not to reveal the secret. Qin Pingon Zui apologized. "I was young and ignorant and acted impulsively, often offensive." Zhou Yu shook his head and said, "It's just an unintentional act, you don't need to care too much. Zhou Xian is banned by the sword. There is no prejudice against the straw-shoed boy when he travels around. The old scholar who has to settle accounts must be counted on the head of the matchmaking. It's just that the old scholar was cheeky back then, and abducted an ancient sword pill named Xiafengdu from Zhou Xian. The roots and feet of this thing are a bit similar to the Naiwen sword embryo presented by Wu Yi in Xiang Mansion. It is a treasure made by a real man in the 5 sacred areas of the Middle Earth. A person of good fate can open the door to the ruins of the real cave mansion with a token in hand. As for how much blessing he can get afterwards, it is uncertain whether the Qi practitioner enters the treasure mountain and returns without time, or returns with a full load. It is a pity that Qin Pingon was unable to find the right way to practice in the future. Before the opportunity came, he was still not allowed to enter. He just reluctantly made him a life thing, but he still failed to become a genuine swordsman. Moreover, the young alley boy who was born in Lizhu Cave Heaven was pure-hearted and could not hear a hint from the old scholar, so he has not been able to take this thing to Zhou Xian for a tour. If Qin Pingon could take a trip to the Middle-earth Shenzhou and Zhou Xian before visiting the Great Wall of Sword Qi for the second time, he would cultivate the Immortal method to gain the fate of Taoism, and finally succeed in his sword practice. A lot of ups and downs. Regarding this matter, Lao Xiaozai and Zhou Yu had a rehearsal in their early years. Lao Xiaozai regretted his intestines and was worried. He only said that he had made a mistake and blamed me. It turned out that Qin Pingon had never drunk wine in those days. He only heard Master Wenxing say that Suishan's fruit stuffed with flowers is a must-see in the world, and where does a teenager take it seriously, and because of his thin-skinned skin he only felt that he had been slashed inexplicably with a sword. People's shaman's landscape formation, still have the face to beg for drinks? But when I said that the old scholar changed his words, the the great god Zhou Xian is the most generous. He is a heroic and arrogant man. There are immortals and money everywhere in the mountains. People with average luck can pick up some, you don't. The mountain is not happy yet. Do you think Qin Pingon would come to Zhou Xian and find his way into the mountain to visit the immortals? Only 10 or 20 hours a day, maybe 11 hours, you can see the figure of a young man walking with his head down. Traveling around cannot go to see the annoyed look of old Xiaoxia scratching his cheeks and beating his chest, but the ears can't escape the noise of the old Xiaoxia's mother-in-law. It is really annoying, so I have to say, take some detours and suffer more. Isn't it a good thing? As a result, traveling around and not talking is okay. Upon hearing this, the old scholar seemed to have finally found a reason and started swearing, damn. He is taller, standing taller, older and more capable, so he likes to stand and talk without back pain, right? Endure hardship? How do you want that child to endure hardship? Zhou Yu said disapprovingly, I was born in a poor alley, lost my parents when I was young, unable to study, isolated and helpless, so I had to wander around and work hard for a living. To be honest, this hardship is nothing. It's not difficult for Qin Pingon to find hundreds or thousands of people his age who have experienced similar situations. The old scholar sighed, probably reluctant to say more about it, and ended the topic with a sentence of, numbness, you know what a fart. Pleasure and suffering is just the way to live in the world without self-knowledge of suffering, is the way of standing up. The Zhou Xian mountain in the middle soil is towering and unparalleled, and all things are developed, which is extremely high in the sky. The 5 sacred mountains must be dome and bulge, steep to the sky, and the water should be deep and wide with a long history and aeration with the sea. Therefore there are Confucian sages commenting on this. The way of the sage is tall, similar to the mountain, and the highest is above the sky. Standing next to Qin Pingon, this is the first time Qing Tong has seen the magnificent scene of Zhou Xian with his own eyes. It is indeed the only one in the world. It's no wonder that the most sacred master would choose this place as a temporary study dojo to fight against the great ancestor of Moon Mountain. Qing Tong had previously visited the 5 sacred mountains of Beipingzu with Qin Pingon. He only talked about the Dao Qi contained in the mountains and rivers. Compared with that, the Qi practitioners of the middle 5 realms, who were just like earth immortals, encountered a soaring realm. The flower and fruit stuffed in Zhou Xian is as famous as the Qingshan wine in Zhuhai Dongtian and the Baihua stuffed in Baiwafuti. In addition, the Suzhai in Shanjun Temple is even more famous in Jiuzhou. The voyage of the Dajiao has a lofty status and vast magical powers. It is rumored that it is much higher than the other 4 Zongtishan monarchs. According to the old View Master, as long as he travels in the Zhou Xian area, he can be regarded as most of the 14th level monks, second only to the Jingsheng Shiping who is in the Forest of Merit. Zhou Yu and Qin Pingon said, you and I meet at the mountain gate. Qin Pingon had an extra hiking stick in his hand, nodded and walked to the gate of Zhou Xian. Obviously he had the acquiescence of the tour and allowed Qin Pingon to use a Taiming stream as a long bridge to span thousands of miles of mountains and rivers. In this stream, if Qing Tong deliberately hides his whereabouts, then the relationship between Qing Tong and Qin Pingon is like a night ship to the world. Just as Qing Tong was about to move, he noticed the fierce gaze of the golden-armored godman, so he stopped immediately, stretched out 2 fingers and supported the edge of the fence to apologize. Just relying on you Tongis Hao Qing Tong, also want to set foot on my Zhou Xian Shinto? What about the customs clearance certificate issued by the Zhongtu Confucian Temple? Otherwise you go and ask for a verbal purpose with the sacrament. Zhou Yu appeared at the gate of the mountain, and there was a huge stone tablet beside it, inscribed with the words, only the sky is above. The 2 sides climbed up the steps together, and there are many scenic spots along the way. Many ancient stone seals have dragon seals, phoenix seals and heavenly script talisman, and they have been eroded by the long river of time, and later generations will not know the true meaning of them. Zhou Xian stone inscriptions are the world's top in terms of quantity and number. There are thousands of monuments in existence, and there are more than 10,000 cliff inscriptions. It is said that all the Zhou Xian steels in the Hauran world, as long as they are from the handwriting of the monks on the mountain genealogy, are to be shared with the Shanjun mansion on schedule. Traveling around has the same meaning as Li Yeho, the king of the South Sea, but the great of Zhou Xian has to be more clear and unmistakable. Do you know that in the future the merits will become very precious, extremely precious? And it is no longer a tasteless one, especially those monks in the ascended realm who have made military exploits. They will regard this thing as one of the great opportunities to break the realm. As long as you have the protection of merit, it is like being in an excellent dojo with the right time and place. Afterwards you can do more with half the effort after you practice. Tianlai, Lu Jubao and his like, make progress in every possible way and hope will come true. For Ai Zhou Xian and the like, it will be a long drought in the rain and the willows will reveal another village. Just talk about the next Sanjiao patriarch San Dao, originally a person like you who has great merit in the body, blessed by nature is abundant and I will be envious of it. Furthermore, the sinking of the land in the southeast is a foregone conclusion. But maybe others don't know the mystery of the inside, don't you know? Then the aura of the vast world will naturally flow from other places in the 8 continents, especially from the northwest to Tongtong Yizhou is tilted. This is where the avenue lies. If the water flows down from above, this is the general trend. This is also the route of that Qing Tong standing on the sidelines and still full of confidence. Because Qing Tong can sit back and enjoy its achievements, I don't understand it. It's fine to say that you are kept in the dark, but since you know it, why are you in a hurry? You are tantamount to using 30% or 40% of your own merits to exchange 10% or 20% of the income for Tongyi's Hao. Don't you understand this account? Qin Pingan, tell me, what do you think? Tell me so that I can smile. After being slapped and covered with a reprimand, Qin Pingan smiled. He was not a predecessor like his own ancestors and could not say such an angry remark. The Jinjiao Shinran caught a glimpse of the young man's face and eyes and said with an aura, I am familiar with the old scholar, it does not mean that I am familiar with you. The Tao is unbiased and the law is like rain. Qin Pingan explained softly, in this majestic rain on the earth of grace, I am in it, no exception. Of course I can learn from the youth and wait for the blessing, but there is a problem here. I am a trainer. It's more a sword repair, the breakthroughs gained with merit, even if it is a series of breakthroughs, such as directly changing from Yuanying to Yupu and then becoming an immortal, but for a pure sword repairer in the long run, it is still if the gain is not worth the loss, this account may have to be calculated like this. Picking up the trekking stick in his hand, Qin Pingan pointed to the mountainside, raised it a few more points, pointed to the top of Zhou Xian and slowly said, Go fast, then you can only spin around there, but if you walk slowly some but can go to the top of the mountain before stopping. Zhou Yu smiled and said, A great sword fairy in the eyes of the hermit is so worthless? Qin Pingan's ability to think this way can't be said to be wrong, it's a kind of narrowing down. But the problem is that a fairyland sword repairer, even in the Middle-earth divine continent, sure enough, Qin Pingan gave the final answer, I want to become a pure sword repairman in the 14th realm. Hearing this, Zhou Yu looked at it and was speechless for a long time. 14th level cultivators are already rare, and the 14th level swordsman is even more powerful. So the 14th level swordsman with pure 2 characters? Pei Min, one of Howren's 3 best swordsmanship, has been blocked by these 2 words for thousands of years? Qin Pingan continued, If the gift of merit, I can decide how to use it. For example, I can exchange it for a large sum of money from the gods, or to win some handy worlds for Luopa Mountain and Xindu Mountain. Bao, whether I'm doing long-term planning for the 2 Zongmen mountain tops, I will definitely reserve a small part of the merits in my hands. Maybe in this dream, I'll just swim in the water mansion to see the water god. No, I'll pay my respects to the mountain. Zhou Yu said, It can be regarded as a kind of gentleman who loves money and uses it in a proper way. By the way, Qin Pingan, the last time the Confucian temple was discussed, why didn't you even get a sage? Among the disciples of Wensheng's lineage, Li Baoping is already a gentleman, a veritable female master, and Li Huai and Dali servant Zhao Yu are both sage titles. Among Qin Ping's students, there is another student named Chao Sunny. Fortunately, this person seems to be a different scholar from Shizu and his husband. Qin Pingan said, If the seniors are willing to recommend 1 or 2 and say a few fair words at the Confucian temple, the juniors would like to thank you in advance. Zhou Yu smiled and said, I don't want to avoid relatives, nor is it my turn to be an outsider with a background. Among the several descendants of Wensheng's lineage, there must be only the youngest guy who can say such things. It is no wonder that the old scholar is the most partial disciple, most like him, loved to drink the most, thick-skinned and elders. The key is that Qin Pingan has also found a wife, and Qing is better than Lan from Lan. Is it a breakthrough for Wensheng's lineage? Just talking about the relationship between the elders Tui Yang, the former literary saint, was too talented, so even if the embroidered tiger is clearly gentle, looks gentle and treats others politely, he will still give people the illusion of domineering. And his disciple Qi Jingchun, it is because of the deep living and simple, rarely go out to travel. Because of his birth, how many people can be older than him, so how many elders in the world dare to regard themselves as elders? As for the person with the worst temper, who is generally recognized as a Wen Xing in the same vein, before practicing the sword he was born with a cold face. After practicing the sword, it was even more troublesome for the old talent to make smiles and apologize. Qin Pingon asked with a smile, "Can senior fellow Daoists make an exception to step into the land and be a guest in the mountains? This guy has long been fascinated by our Suzhai in Suishan." Traveling around was non-committal. He smiled. "How come it's let's Suishan?" Qin Pingon said, "Since the senior is familiar with her husband, he is a good friend, how can the junior and Suishan be considered half-done?" Zhou Yu reminded, "Since the relationship is only half-baked, don't make the idea of those inscriptions." Qin Pingon asked, "The incense of Mount Jushan?" Zhou Yu nodded and said, "No problem. The old scholar does have a good student who can share the worries for her husband. In the future, the truth of this deed of repairing the land gap will become clear to the world." With the consistent style of the old scholars, let alone the sages of the Confucian temple who will be annoyed, I am afraid that even if it comes to the saint of ceremony, the old scholars will all a few words, but old talents may also rarely be silent. Like reading a good book, not willing to share it. Qing Tong, who stood in place obediently waiting for the news, suddenly sounded a decree from Suishan in the Lake of Heart, which unexpectedly allowed her to climb the mountain to visit the mountain and eat a bowl of plain noodles. The godman, the golden body, has no leakage. From Qing Tong's aura of sight, it is a kind of majestic atmosphere of, the mountain is almost in line with the sky. So Qing Tong always felt that on the border of the Zhongyue land, if Zhou Yu handed a sword from Suishan, Qing Tong waited a little, and he might not have to go back to Tongyi's Hao. So I was lucky enough to be able to go to Suishan to eat the plain noodles before leaving. It was really a surprise. The young fellow respectfully bowed to Yao Yao. After thanking Zhou Yu, he drew a gourd and drew on a gourd and learned the same way as Chen Ping's. He arrived at the foot of the mountain and, stepping out of a picture of dreams, even if today is New Year's Eve, the good men and believers who burn incense along the main Shinto path are still in an endless stream. The voices are so full, and the incense of Suishan is so prosperous, it is no wonder that traveling can refine that gold body. Qing Tong wears a power fence again, hides in the ranks of ordinary masters, and walks in the bustling mountain road. Qing Tong is complacent and looks quite contented. Hanging out with Mr. Jing, I really don't have to worry about eating and drinking. Look, the great god Suishan must give a face. Zhou Yu took Qin Pingon to the top of Suishan mountain, ascending and looking into the distance, teaching people only think that all the mountains outside this mountain are small. Someone once said that the chaos of Shinto is one. Some people say that my way is consistent. As for the two sides, who is right and wrong, who is the unity of all things and who is the life of all things, for the time being there is no answer. Zhou Yu asked, "Why does this youth think you are Jing Juzhong?" Qin Pingon said frankly, "I was misled by Yun Lu of Jiuzhen Immortal Hall." Zhou Yu smiled and said, "It seems that smart people are most afraid of Jing Zhongzhong." Qin Pingon nodded and said, "Anyone who is too smart will be afraid of the smartest person." Zhou Yu's eyes are playful and he squints at Qin Pingon. Qin Pingon understood clearly and shook his head. "I may not be able to reach the mental strength of senior brother and Mr. Zheng in my life." Qing Tong didn't dare to take a long walk and climb the mountain. At the moment he was seated in a noodle shop near the Shanjun temple and had a bowl of hot plain noodles. The taste was very good and the reputation was well deserved. Zhou Yu said, "The opportunity that originally belonged to the Xiafengdu sword pill is outdated, but now it has already been spent elsewhere." Qin Pingon smiled freely, "It's just a matter of fate." Zhou Yu nodded. "If you don't have this kind of mind, you would still ask for a pure sword repair in the 14th realm," and said, "It's not better than the other 8 continents, especially the Aquarius and Beiju Luzhou. One is your hometown after all. The status of a hermit is the most effective, and it is naturally close to you. But this Middle-earth divine continent has always been the most polite. Being young and vigorous and ignoring the rules are two different things. For the rest of the Mountain Monarch Mansion, I will say hello to you first. Just say that you will travel to the 5 sacred mountains next time. How about it?" Of course, Qin Pingon would not refuse and thanked him. Just let Qing Tong finish the bowl of plain noodles. Before leaving, Qin Pingon and Shan Jun traveled around and thanked them. Sui Shan is the only place where my husband can drink happily. In the future, as long as there is a place where Luopa Mountain and Qingping Jianzong can be used, the younger generation can only be sent. Traveling around is not polite with young people. Is to be kinder than the old star. Zhou, you didn't even feel that Qin Pingon was saying something that would be cost-effective. After only waiting for the patriarch of the three teachings to go out of the way, it will be a new situation that has not been seen in the world for 10,000 years. Only those 14th realm cultivators who are unconstrained will show up one by one when they want to, and they will all take their own shots. On the avenue, chaos was everywhere. Yangmo conspiracies are coming in abundance. You must know that before leaving Suishan, Master Most Saint once said to Li Xing, "After I leave, the plan for you will follow, so be careful." The 5 mountains in the Middle Earth are Sui Mountain, Gui Mountain, Jui Mountain, Yanji Mountain, and Jushu Mountain. The female mountain monarch of Yanji Mountain, named Zhou Xian, has a rather weird name, Bitter Vegetable. At that time, the husband restored the Confucian temple, and Zhou Xian gave a gift from all directions at Gongda Lin, including an origami black-clothed swallow. On the side of Jiui Mountain, Shanjun presented a pot of Wenyun calamus at that time. However, the 2 mountain monarchs who sit in Guishan and Jushu respectively participated in the discussion of the Confucian temple, but they did not go to the Gongda forest. On Gishan's side, it was because of an old grievance that he didn't deal with Wensheng's line. There are 5 mountains in one country, and Mount Gui is one of the 5 mountains on a continent. There are a large number of 5 mountains under its jurisdiction. In one of these mountains, the old scholar once went to visit, once because of his disciple Zhou Xian. The mountain monarch who lives in Shushan has never mixed up with such mundane things that are contaminated with human affection and sophistication. However, Huailian has a great respect for the Great Wall of Sword Qi. He once publicly declared that the Great Wall of Sword Qi has fought for a few more years, and Howren has fought fewer battles for a few years. There are countless lives for me. The merit is great. The implication was that Shanjun Huailian obviously admired the last hermit of the Great Wall of Jianqi. It's just that Qin Pingon took Qing Tong on a long trip, but they returned without success. They were all things Qin Pingon expected. Public and private were clearly distinguished. If it's not for his husband's face, plus Suishan travels. I said hello in advance, and it is estimated that there will be a few lawsuits in the Confucian temple. The female mountain monarch Zhou Xian, although she did not promise the hidden official to light the incense of the heart, she still graciously invited Qin Pingon to the Shanjun shrine and drank a cup of tea. Qing Tong was so drunk and drank a cup of the prestigious Rizu tea. In addition, the Jiui mountain god was still polite, and he appeared at the gate to remind Qin Pingon that this kind of transgressive behavior cannot be repeated. However, he chatted with Qin Pingon about something, saying that it was the Mrs. Yen Yen who was free someday and welcomed her to Jiui Mountain as a guest. Qin Pingon agreed with a smile. Howren has said that the world has 2.5 plum blossoms, and one is in Jiui Mountain since ancient times. The monarch of Mount Gui, the named Tianjin, did not see Qin Pingon directly. He only asked a temple wish to come to the foot of the mountain and said, "Forgive me if you are not welcome, the hermit can go home." Qin Pingon, who had eaten a sturdy closed door, stood outside the mountain gate and did not leave immediately. After holding his hands, he looked up at the plaque on the mountain gate. Of course, the gray-haired old temple wishing did not dare to continue chasing people. This kind of high heavenly gods fighting, a little temple wishing, can't afford it. If you don't know that Lord Shan is staring at the movement of the mountain gate at this moment, Lao Miaozhu would really like to have a polite greeting with this famous young hidden official. And the of Shushan Mountain, who appeared in person at the gate of the mountain, sneered at Qin Pingon and put on a very serious remark. "This is not the Ascension Realm sword repair, it will be in the future. Howren, any mountain in the world, isn't it your own door?" In Qin Pingon Tao's heart, the lake of heart rippled and Qing Tong's voice resounded. "Since you know that the governor can't do anything, why bother to ask for trouble?" In fact, Qing Tong did not sprinkle salt on Qin Pingon's wounds, because this kind of reckless visit would definitely annoy people in vain, and it was no less unpleasant than the market in the mountains. It was a big deal. Taboo things. To give the simplest example, in the future, if Qin Pingon travels to the Guishan and Jushu mountains, even if the 2 Wuyue mountain monarchs do not know Qin Ping's whereabouts at all, they will still create an illusory avenue out of thin air. Win over. Qin Pingon said, if you don't really ask for a request, how can you know that there is no case? As long as there is any mountain monarch who is willing to agree to the 5 sacred mountains in the Middle Earth, in addition to traveling around Zhou Xian for example, if the Jushi mountain nodded, then Qin Pingon will rerun Guishan, Yanzishan and Jiu mountain. If it was Zhou Xian who was visiting for the second time, nodded and agreed, then the 3 mountain monarchs including Hualien might not be able to send Qin Pingon so easily. Just giving a sum of merit is not enough, so what about fame and fortune? To know the boundaries of the 5 sacred mountains from the mansion of the gods to the many Daoist temples in the mountains, Qin Pingon has long been able to find out clearly, only that the female sword with which Zhou Xian became attached is repairing Zhumei. The latter is still as a young girl. Zhumei had followed Lin Zhanbai to the Great Wall of Jianqi. There are many martial arts in Jushu Mountain, but will Shan Jun Hualien too much? For example, Qin Pingon promised to break the boundary by himself, or who would break through the boundary with the strongest in Luopa Mountain and would choose Jushu Mountain. And there are many swordsmanships in the Guishan realm, and Shan Jun doesn't deal with his own Wenxing in the same line? In the future, those sword fairy embryos who have a secret lantern from the Shanjun's mansion hanging behind their backs will be able to practice leisurely. It is best to behave in a decent manner. Don't be too arrogant. Otherwise, the flying sword won't be long if you ask the sword to take the sword. Of the eyes. Another example is the Niaoju mountain, where the place where the monarchy is closed, but it is one of the 2 princely mountains of Jushu Mountain. Qin Pingon laughed at himself, for different. Tui Yang Jing Juzhong Wu Shuangjiang are really hard to learn. If it were changed to senior brother Tui Yang to take this trip to the 5 sacred mountains of China, with the same realm and the same identity, it is estimated that no matter what the feelings in their hearts, the 5 mountain monarchs would definitely nod their heads eventually. In Guishan, known as the Land of the Moon, there is a noble guest who will not drive away, Gu Qingsong with the road named Xianxia, and an unnamed senior disciple who taught Lu Qin as the 3rd head of Bai Yujing. Gu Qingsong complained to the mountain monarch. What's the matter with you? Why don't you listen to persuasion at all? If you become a mountain god, you can't understand people, right? The elegant-looking elders in Confucian shirts have become accustomed to this. Someone's speech only needs to go in and out of the right ear. Gu Qingsong said to himself, remember the stinking problem of eating or not at the beginning on your plate. The top of the alternate mountain was one of the alternate hills, but it was not because Lu 16 was not allowed to travel and eat. After a lot of hardship, I also accused Lu Shirzhua of being a beast with a flat-headed hair. Whatever the result, he was trampled on the ground by the old scholar with a few feet and fell into the ground for more than 100 meters. I have to learn from the old scholar to protect my shortcomings, right? I helped quarrel to the Confucian temple. How did it end? I heard that the embroidered tiger who worked as a brother for Lu 16 directly gave the mountain monarch on the top of the mountain. Nearly 100 crimes are listed, each of which can be investigated. Not to mention that the top of the mountain failed to regain its height. I just ate in prison at Gongdolin. Was it delicious? You were embarrassed at that time? Anyhow, it was a great mountain monarch. At that time, why didn't you directly use your life's magical powers to help dig a hole in the temple of Confucius? Now, who doesn't know that Lao Xiuzai is the most partial disciple of Qin Pingon, the closed disciple? Are you on the pole? Mr. Lao Shan frowned and said, is there no end? Gu Qingsong snorted. If I don't have anything to ask, I would rarely tell you these truths. Mr. Lao Shan said, I got a decree from the Confucian temple before, but I just acted according to orders. Gu Qingsong doubted. It was Saint Naya who spoke and asked you to stumble Qin Pingon? Lao Shanjun said angrily, speak carefully. Gu Qingsong said to himself, surely it won't happen. Fiaxing doesn't deal with Wenxing again, it is also a dispute of knowledge. Aliang is a coup-headed strategist in Wenxing's line. Otherwise, which Confucian temple leader? Shouldn't be. Now that Lao Xiu has just recovered his status, with a hard waist and a big voice, Jing Xing Shiping is an ear-reporting who can't control his mouth. I have the best relationship with the old scholar. In the Confucian temple who has such a hard head. Lao Shanjun said, that decree has no signature. Gu Qingsong rubbed his chin, that's weird. The little master always tells people that they don't do secret things, but it's not the instruction of the sub-sage. Could it be that the holy master like me came to the Tianjin Daoyu side? Have something to ask for? Lao Shanjun furiously said, Gu Qingsong, you don't have to talk about it. If you dare to talk nonsense, go down the mountain immediately. Never thought that Gu Qingsong dropped his sleeve and said, just leave. He really disappeared in a flash and went outside the mountain. Just a moment later, Gu Qingsong shrank the mountains and rivers again and returned to the place. Gu Qingsong said, I was driven out by you twice and I have been asking for help 3 times in total. Friends Tianjin, you don't give me the slightest face anymore. I really want to swear. No matter how good Lao Shanjun is to raise qigong, he can't stand Gu Qingsong's open eyes and talk nonsense. Dare you Xianxia not open your mouth and be a mute before? Gu Qingsong shook his head and said, isn't it as good as a young man in his early 40s who can hold his breath? Tianjin Daoist, a lot of years old, have all lived to a certain dog day? There are many mountain monks in the world, and at least half of their popular nicknames come from Gu Qingsong's mouth. This person can still jump alive to this day. I have to say it is a miracle. In the Zhou mountain, a new wine shop has been opened in recent years, but the reputation is not obvious and the threshold is high, so there have been few customers. At the moment, apart from the old shopkeeper and a shop assistant named Su Jia, there are only a wine guest. Shanjun has a lot of flowers. An old Daoist riding a green bull, carrying a bag crossbody, adorned with a row of emerald green bamboo pipes, bumped against each other, crisp and sweet. Having saved enough money for drinks, I'm here to drink again today. In the ancient years, each of the 5 sacred mountains in the Middle Earth had a real person's administration. Among them there were 3 real persons. And this monarch, who is known as the Qingyo Taoist priest, happened to be one of the 1 principal and 3 true men. After leaving the night ship, the old Taoist priest came here to revisit the old place and reopen the dojo at the old site in the mountains. It is just that the authority of the past years is a thing of the past. In the early days, the 5 sacred mountains and Dadu, the real people in charge were not the mountain monarchs and the water gods, but the land gods, who were invited by their saints to come out of the mountain. When Li Xing later abolished all the real person government, Feng Jun went out and traveled, but he provoked swordsman Pei Min. The sky and the earth seemed to be unstable, so he had to hide on the night ship. The old Taoist put the green cow outside the door, entered the wine shop alone, and had a slap in the door with the mountain monarch Huailian, and then asked the old treasurer for a pot of Wangyu wine. People are in good spirits at happy events. On the night boat, the old Taoist priest and the young hidden official made a deal and obtained a true picture of the 5 sacred mountains of the ancestors' rank. Harmony generates wealth. This is called harmony and wealth. To be honest, Qin Pingon finally failed to climb the mountain today. The old Taoist was actually quite regretful. When he came on the road, he thought of going to the wine shop. When he met the unkind mountain monarch, he would hold a few words for the young hermit. Just work. There was a bird cage on the counter and there was an oriole inside. Seeing the old Taoist priest who came to sit down, he opened his mouth and said, trash, trash. The veteran Taoist was not at all annoyed and he smiled and said, a cultivator of immortality in the poor way is not a pure martial artist who can only fight and kill. He can have a few kilograms of martial arts. Su Jia put the hip flask and the white bowl on the table and dismantled the platform and said, Master Shanjun just said, not mentioning Qin Pingon, only that the sycamore tree spirit of the town demon building, in addition to the Ascension Realm cultivation base, can also be regarded as half a godly martial artist. Feng Jun smiled and said, poor Dao is competing with a sycamore tree and it won't be impossible. The old shopkeeper leaned over the counter and said with a smile, I was so clumsy that I couldn't see the depth of the hidden official's martial arts. As soon as he mentioned the young hidden official who had drunk twice in his shop, the shop assistant Su Jia became angry and said annoyed, the innocent sign of the small wine shop in Jianqi Great Wall, but they all learned from our shop. Feng Jun took a sip of his drink and sighed with his beard, I was on a night boat and I had a chance to meet Qin Daoyu. There was still a discussion about each other. There is a saying in Qin Daoyu that there is no lack of the world's Taoism. It's just that the Taoist priests on the street are worried about them. It's really true, no water leaks. It's no wonder that at a young age you can be in a high position and perform successive feats. Su Jia said, that guy is lucky. The old shopkeeper smiled and shook his head, because Su Jia and Chao Xiai are friends, so Qin Pingon is not pleasing to the eye all the time. Feng Jun even shook his head, holding a bowl with one hand and then raising one hand, retorting, this is a bad remark, to underestimate Qin Daoyu. A man is so hungry that he can eat 9 big meat buns in one breath and ordinary people eat buns. The more you eat, the more unpalatable. If you eat the first steamed bun, the taste is the same as the ninth steamed bun. This is a cultivator. In this life, the poor Tao will travel north and south, travel the world, and read countless people like Qin Daoyu. A handful of them. Huai Lian said, "You two just ask if you want to. You don't need to be circumspect." One deliberately involved Qin Pingon, and the other took the conversation. In the final analysis, he was still curious about why he refused to climb Qin Pingon. Feng Jun asked curiously, since fellow Dao Huai Lian doesn't have a bad feeling for the young hidden official, and even has a somewhat undisguised look at him, why should he not be allowed to climb the mountain today? What's the matter? Huai Lian sneered, sword repair does not look at one's own realm, does it also depend on identity? Feng Jun shook the wine bowl, but after all, isn't this a reason not to let him climb the mountain? In addition to his identity as a sword repairman, Qin Pingon is still a martial artist who can compete with Chao Ci in 4 rounds. Huai Lian said, "The reason is given, believe it or not, you are free." Feng Jun looked regretful and said, "Unfortunately on the ship the news is not well informed. Otherwise, even if the poor Dao sells iron, he will have to collect a sum of money and bet on Qin Daoyu to win Chao Ci." Regarding Chao Ci and Qin Pingon, 2 martial artists of the same age, the monks on the mountain and the martial artist on the mountain were arguing and quarreling endlessly in the dispute between the 2 martial artists of the same age. The monks in the mountains generally admire Chao Ci, and feel that in the future martial arts, Qin Pingon will not be able to stand side by side with Chao Ci in this life, so he can only catch up all the way. Chao Zihui was Qin Pingan's lifelong martial arts skill. If he is lucky, he can be awarded the title of second under heaven. However, pure Wufu mostly agrees with Qin Pingan even more. There is only one point of view, and a consensus has been reached on the mountain. That is not to talk about the final height of the martial arts of Chao and Qin, only the process of practicing martial arts and boxing. You can learn from Qin Pingon, but you don't need to learn from Chao Ci. Qin Pingon took Qing Tong to leave Zhong to Shenzhou, returned to Aquarius Island, and walked on a ridge road called Deswiling. Qing Tong didn't dare to say, "I have really visited the mountain temple here, even if it is finished, can I return to Tonggizong?" Qin Pingon gave a hum. The mountain goddess Wei Wei walked out of the clay statue in the temple, waiting for her to see the young sword fairy in the blue shirt, long coat and cloth shoes, a little embarrassed. "Mr. Qin, Qin Jianxian, Lord Qin, Master Hermit?" If Wei Wei remembers correctly, this is the 4th time Qin has been here. 4 times in less than 30 years. Hey, could it be? When she thought about it together, she couldn't wait to slap herself in the face. Is that silly book of landscape travels? Did you forget the scene when you first met? There is never the slightest bit of pity, fragrant and cherished jade, only the flower is destroyed by hand. Now the mountain temple is lavish and developed. Wei Wei had to admit that it was all given by the person in front of him, and the numbers that Qin Jianxian taught to his family temple before were really useful. Sitting on the bluestone bench outside the temple, Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Everything is always difficult at the beginning and everything goes smoothly. It is gratifying and congratulatory." Wei Wei stood by Xianxia grinning and said, "If there were not many things plus my little mountain god, the foundation is not stable and it is not easy to move, otherwise I would have gone to Luopa Mountain and Qin Jianxian to come to thank you. Previously, let the temple serve as the servant girl. According to Qin Pingan's method, I learned the goddess in the book to dream, and traveled with the mountains and rivers of the students who went to Beijing to rush the exam. A scholar who looks rather stubborn but quite knowledgeable after waking up from a dream is regarded as a good omen, so he is full of confidence. In the Beijing science arena, he is truly talented and thoughtful and writing like a god. Although I didn't get the first class and third-ranked scholars, he also got the second class first name, and he was able to pass and roll his name in the Golden Palace. After that, he was even admitted to the Imperial Academy without any examination. If nothing goes wrong, 6 books will be distributed as the principals soon. If Beijing is released again, it will be the start of a county magistrate in the officialdom. Moreover, it is said that in the Beijing municipal examination, the chief examiner, who has been in charge of a country's cultural balance for more than 20 years, as well as those scoring officers, were full of praise for the person's examination papers. It was only after the palace examination that he performed slightly abnormally before he was not among the candidates. His Majesty the Emperor drew the first 3 names in a Jubi circle. Shitzi High School on the way back home from Beijing, went straight to the mountain temple, worshipped incense, kowtow inscribed on the wall, returned to the study and wrote a poem, recorded in his collection of works, specifically to record this miraculous thing, planning to do it in the future out of the book. The scholar thinks it is a dream come true to Wei Wei and the two goddess attendants, is it not? Qin Pingon smiled and reminded, in the future read more sage books and read less of those miscellaneous books. Wei Wei still doesn't know Qin Pingon is actually here for the 5th time. It's just that the last time I watched Wei Wei and the two temple attendants, chatting about the landscape travel notes, the chat was very happy. The goddess of the mountain smiled and rolled on the mat. Qin Pingon didn't show up so as not to be disappointed. Wei Wei was confused and could only nod his head. Nowadays, dozens of red lanterns secretly made by mountain temples are illuminated on the realm of temples and temples. In market language there is a sentence, something is covered by me. In fact, the word cover is quite knowledgeable. Within the boundaries of the mountain temples and temples, those lanterns are not only the high gates of the county government, but also the families of the gentry who are still humble, and more than half of the lanterns are in the poor lanes and rural villages of that city. Qin Pingon smiled and said, isn't it difficult to borrow again? Wei Wei owed a debt to the county town temple before. It is reasonable to say that even if he now has a cultural fate after the debt is repaid, the mountain temple will certainly not be able to build such a large number of incense lanterns. This is like Huang Tinghua, who is already considered to be rich in water transportation. The Xianxia of the rivers including the Wuxia and Hanxijiang are already a little harder. This has led to the Taidian River at the door of Xiang Mansion's house that has not been elevated to Jiangshui Xingshan. It was not that Emperor Huang Tinghua didn't want to cling to Xiang Mansion. It was because of limited luck and powerlessness in a country. Wei Wei said with a guilty conscience, after changing the wine debt and owing a new debt, I still have to pay it back. Qin Pingon smiled and helped explain, is it just not in a hurry? Wei Wei smiled embarrassedly and bit the bullet and said, I am anxious to repay it. I don't have debts and I am light. I understand the truth. I want to set a deadline. It's just that the neighbors of the counties and townsmen are not worried about them. Wait. I have accumulated enough incense here and it's not too late, and on the side of the Zichengwang temple, I also actively asked me if I need incense. Qin Pingon smiled and said, that's right, the rivers and lakes don't help the poor, and the relatives help the poor but don't help the lazy. Distant relatives are not as good as neighbors. The neighbors on the mountain are nothing more than the Xianxia mansion, plus the gods of mountains and waters, the Qinghuang temple and the Wenwu temple. In the past, Wei Wei's mountain temple was a poor man who could not make ends meet, and Wei Wei, the newly inspired mountain empress, seemed to be a poor manager at first glance. Of course it is different now. Qin Pingon suddenly asked, what is the name of the pilgrim who donated money to build the temple? Wei Wei smiled brightly and said, Zhang Gudong. Qin Pingon silently wrote down the name. Before Wei Wei found a place on the mountain and built a small temple. There was a big local pilgrim who donated 2 large sums of sesame oil. This person is kind but does not seek fame and is involved in the construction of bridges. The most generous. After that, Wei Wei invited a lonely old woman who was kind and believed in Buddhism to come to the temple as a blessing, and some old women nearby would often come to the temple to help. Qin Pingon said about Xianxiang. Of course, Wei Wei agreed without hesitation. She had already begun to enjoy herself. She no longer planned to take it and knew that she was going to be really lavish this time. After paying off the debts to those city gods, there must be a surplus on the mountain temple. I can create a bunch of red lanterns secretly made by the mountain god's mansion again. Just remembering something, Wei Wei asked cautiously, my mountain temple, after all, occupies the location of the old temple site. Will it be a taboo? Does that count? The dove occupying the magpie's nest? Qin Pingon smiled and shook his head and said, don't think too much. If you really feel sorry for it, hold a temple fair every 15th day of the Lunar New Year and try to add some incense to the temple for the common people. Wei Wei's eyes lit up. Temple fair? Qin Pingon said, you are just renting out the shop and collecting some rent. The rent should be less than more. In the future, relying on this small and flowing income, you can save a little bit of money and then hire a bunch of skilled craftsmen at the foot of the mountain. Follow the scrolls at the bottom of the mountain and the pictures of the 16 Yingxian and 18 arhats on the fan to build an arhat hall. Once this is done, you should be a kind of votive. However, I personally suggest that it is better to erect a temple to worship the five. In the Arhat Hall with 100 Arhat statues, those who enter it can first choose an Arhat to start counting according to their age and birth date, and count all the way through. The Arhat who counts at the end will be protected by that Arhat. Wei Wei widened his eyes and said, "This is also okay." Wei Wei's words were full of sighs. "What kind of sword fairy or mountain master you Qin Pingon do you have to do business? If I were the ancestor of the business, I would directly let you be the second in command." Qin Pingan angrily smiled and said, "I didn't talk nonsense, I'm paying attention to this. I took Pei Qian and Chao Qingqing on a long trip before, during which I passed by a temple, and inside that large temple I did say so." Wei Wei, frustrated, put his hands together quickly and said, "Sincere is spirit and sincere is spirit." Qin Pingan stood up, hesitating, and gave an extra amount of merit than expected. Where did he use it? At this moment, a familiar voice sounded in the Lake of Heart, asking about something. "Qin Pingan, what do you think of that 3-4 dispute?" Qin Pingan hesitated for a while and gave his own answer. The man smiled and said, "Very well, I can go back." In Tongyi's house in the corridor of the town demon tower, Lu Yen asked with a smile, "What answer is it that makes the most sage master so satisfied? This problem is not trivial." As a close disciple of Wen Sheng's line, Qin Pingan wants to answer decently. The key is to be sincere, which is naturally extremely difficult. The most sacred master stroked his beard and smiled. Qin Pingan only said one sentence. "Z said there are no classes." Rao and Lu Yen would be astonished for a long time, think for a moment, pat the railing lightly and laughed. Poor Dao sighs inferiorly. Sort of coming. Chapter 936. Walking out of the long river of time, Qing Tong took a closer look and wondered, "Why didn't you go back to the town demon building directly? Is there a mountain on Aquarius Island who wants to see?" Qin Pingan shook his head and said, "I've never been here before. It's just that someone made a temporary intention. Let me treat the guests as if I were to come here to see someone off." Qing Tong is becoming more and more puzzled. "Who can point your finger at you? I can see a sparkling spot not far away. A pavilion is hidden in the shade of green trees, and a few melodious and clear chimes upstairs are vaguely heard." Qin Pingan said, "Let's go to the front and wait for the rabbits." Approaching, it is a large-scale shrine, Banjfen Shrine. There are 2 ancient locust trees in front of the door. Outside is a large pond. Willows are planted around the water, and there are a few green trees outside the door. The horse is tied in the shade of the willow, and there is another embroidered carriage, parked at the corner of the temple. It should be a family member of a rich family. The old coachman is wearing a thick cotton robe with his hands in his sleeves, and he is dozing in a daze. Son. Qing Tong followed Qin Pingan into the ancestral temple. Since it was New Year's Eve, the natural incense was like a natural incense. So far, there are no good men and women who come here to respect the incense. Only in the corridor outside the hall, there are a few children in children's costumes squatting down, throwing copper coins to play underneath, and seeing Qin Pingan and the others, they just looked up and didn't say hello. There are moon cave gates on both sides. If you want to visit the back hall of the ancestral temple, you must pass by. Qin Pingan stood outside the threshold of the main hall for a moment, then walked to the moon cave. No one was seen. First listen to the ringing sound, which is crisp and sweet. 2 beautiful women walked out head-on. One woman, turned into a cloud bun, leaning to Cui Chiao, wearing a simple and elegant woven silk shirt, surrounded by a young girl. About the woman's close-knit handmaid, Ochai shirt is light green skirt, a pair of slightly old embroidered shoes. There is also an old woman wearing a bamboo leaf robes, holding a jade wishful in her hand, most of which is the blessing of the abbot of this Fen shrine. Qin Pingan immediately moved to give way. The first woman walked straight without squinting her eyes. The young girl brushed shoulders with the pilgrim man, but couldn't help but look at it from the corner of her eye. The head of this person is not the hosta. The blue shirt and the long coat and shoes are clean. Refreshing 30-year-old age is just a bit far behind the book, expensive and clear. He is not an outstanding person. If nothing else, he is a poor man in the county town. There is no merit, so come here to burn incense and pray for a title on the gold list? Qing Tong couldn't help but asked softly, "Who are we waiting for?" These 3 people who walked out of the moon cave are obviously just ordinary people with naked eyes. Qin Pingan said in his heart, "Lu Shen." The green face changed slightly. I really don't want to have any involvement with that by Yujing Third Master. Only from the current situation, it is difficult not to meet Lu Chen. Beipingzi Mengliang is in the country not far from Fen Shrine. A young Taoist priest walking on a mountain trail wearing a lotus crown, holding a few unannounced local county chronicles in his hand, looked up at a ferry boat passing by like a bird. Taoism has depths and eyesight is high and low. Taoist priests on the ground can see each other, but the ferry cannot find the young Taoist priests below. The young Taoist priest lifted his body lightly, dangling in the water and wandering all the way, feeling that the surface of the water is not windy and the glass is slippery, and the boat is not moving. The young Taoist stopped for a while and shook his sleeves again as if there were thousands of threads of thread far or near, and the thread was called cause and effect. He stretched out his and gently pulled the thread. There seems to be an echo in the distance. The movement is very small, almost completely negligible, but the Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown, the Taoist is high enough and he looks far away. God's thin Taoism came to the territory of Mengliang country. Finally, at the entrance of a mountain village, I saw a lonely child. The young Taoist priest approached him. After stopping, one bent over and the other raised his head. Both sides faced each other. After watching for a moment, the child was ashamed and lowered his head. I went to the Yuzhang County logging yard before, and after bidding farewell to Lin Jingqing, he did not return directly to the Qingming world. Anyway, Bai Yujing had seen your brother Yu sitting in the town and couldn't make any mistakes. For example, today the outer heaven suppressed the outer heaven demon, and the master personally ended it. If it weren't for the urgency of the Confucian temple, Lu Chen really wanted to stay in this vast world for a few more years. Just as Yu Feng flew up to the sky, Lu Chen suddenly moved his heart slightly, looking for the root. It turned out that it was in the boundary of the Dream Beam country. There seemed to be one person and the same thing, almost at the same time touching the heartstrings, so he changed his mind and went to a nearby place first. Xianxia Mountain, but did not show up this time. The Golden Core monk Huang Zhongho, who cultivated Yunfeng, will soon become the new mountain owner of Xianxia Mountain. Xianxia Mountain is now a blessing in disguise and has a prototype of the sect, and everything is ready. I only owe a Jade Pu, the old mountain lord, the Green Cypress Peak Kai Jinjian, and Huang Zhongho are all promising. Within 100 years the sect can be expected. Men spend their sorrows by drinking, and if they have a deep bond with Tianlu, they will become a lover. I don't know that next time I drink with that Huangshan master who is deeply in love, it will be the year of the monkey again. Lu Chen looked down at the child without the qualifications for cultivation and said, "You are not afraid of birth. It is because the poor students are good-faced. Women and children will inevitably be close to each other after seeing them. By the way, would you say that you are very close? Mandarin the worst, can you understand Mandarin?" The child nodded. Although both the Mengliang kingdom and the Qinghuan kingdom have separated from the status of the Dali vassal, the Dali Mandarin is now a Izhou Yayan, and the monarchs and ministers of the Mengliang kingdom have spared no effort in promoting the Yayan. Many senior teachers of the school, because of this, I have been complaining about it. I am a lot of years old and I never wanted to be students for those young county instructors. Lu Shen squatted down and said, "Pan Dao sees your bones are peculiar, dragons roar and tigers roar and Feng Yu Luxiang like a fierce husband." The child looked blank. Played the piano against the cow. Lu Shen smiled and said, "The monk is like the tea tree on the mountain, the wild is the first and the garden is the second." Obviously, in Lu Chen's eyes, the genealogical monks like the flowers and trees in the garden are not as spiritual as those who cultivated in the mountains. Lu Shen asked, "Have you ever been to a school?" The child shook his head. Lu Shen pointed to the child's feet. There were some ghost-painted symbols on the ground. "Who did you learn these from?" The child replied honestly, "Go up the mountain to feed cattle, they are all on the rocks and you will often see them." Lu Shen asked with a smile, "Do you still have cows in your house?" The child said, "Help the people in the village." Lu Shen said suddenly, "I have been busy for a long time, can I have a meal?" The child smiled with a dark face, a thin body and the worn-out quilted jacket on his body that was so patched up, and leaning on the crappy needle and thread, there was no lint turned out. Lu Chen lifted his ass, craned his neck and looked at the top of the mountain. There is no mountain or cliff cut, but it is a treasure land of geomantic omen. There is a clear spring in the mountain. There was an unknown Taoist priest who practiced here. It's no wonder that you will be caught by the Wild Peach Pavilion, and be perceived by yourself in the Yuzhang County of Dali. The Taoist energy of this mountain has been accumulated for a long time, and there is a fairy relationship in the mountain which is about to overflow. Therefore, every time Tao Qi affects the vibrations and ripples of the mountain roots and water veins, it is like a heartbeat. It's just this kind of heartbeat, known as resonance between heaven and earth, with minimal movement and extremely long intervals. I just happened to be hit by the Nin Taoist passing by boat. Otherwise, even if it was an ascension realm, staying here for a year or a half would only treat this mountain as an ordinary dojo relic. Lu Chen had a small accident and then pinpointed it. He was surprised he was not tacky, although the person who proved the Tao here was not high at that time, and when he left the cave in the mountain he was just a golden pill. Dixian, but this person has no teacher's biography, no chance for the immortal family. Only by self-realization he has cultivated a clear golden pill. This kind of person is called favored by heaven and earth, without luck, self-realization on the mountain. If the blessing is better, the achievement will be very exaggerated. Don't talk about the ratio with ordinary masters, but only talk about the number of Qi practitioners, and there are as many as cultivators, and one way of climbing is like crucian carp crossing the river. The Taoist people who can walk to the top of the mountain come and go. After all, they are a handful of rare people. After you sing, I will appear on the stage. They will show their romance and be beaten by the wind and rain. Lu Xian sighed, stood up and hit the Dong mansion between the cliffs in the mountain. Because I have already guessed the identity of the other party. It's just that Lu Chen's etiquette is not because of who the other party is, but what the other party has done. The wisdom sword slashes the demons while swinging, and the demons go around with lightning for thousands of miles. It can be vaguely seen that there was a middle-aged Taoist priest named Lu Yen whose name was Chunyang. Here is the golden core, leaving a Tao law swordsmanship pointing directly at the golden core in the mountains, waiting for future generations to be destined. When going down the mountain he carried a purple bamboo stick in his hand, a large gourd scoop hung from his waist, wrapped his head with a happy towel, a sword on his back, dressed in yellow shirts and hemp shoes and traveled everywhere. The unknown Taoist left a saying, "Here you will be a golden immortal in another day, and when you hear the sound of the bell in the other day, you will learn the art of gold refining the sun god, finishing the jade refining and bearing fruit." I met a medicinal picker who entered the mountain at the foot of the mountain. He did not answer any questions. The Taoist only said 4 words, "Thank God." The child hesitated when he saw the young Taoist master doing this. He also faced the mountain. He was so ignorant and obsessed he gave a big gift. Lu Xian saw this scene and sighed, "If you have a relationship with Tao, it is also with me. No wonder the poor Tao will be drawn here by you." When it comes to the matter of cultivation, the ordinary Xianfu sects on the mountain have a solid aptitude for cultivation. After all laws are impermanent, and the matter of blessing is too illusory and difficult to predict. But for the great monks who have been on the mountain for a long time, they value the cultivation method. Greater than qualifications. The child in front of him is not qualified to practice, but has a root of wisdom just like someone's situation. The latter's life porcelain is broken, which means that there is no bowl in his hand and he can't hold things. Lu Xian squatted down again and asked, "What's your name?" The child replied, "There is only a surname, no name. The surname Yi is the leaf of the leaf. A good surname, a leaf of duckweed, belongs to the sea. Sure enough, the 3 of us have fate." Lu Chen smiled and said, "As for the surname and the nameless, there are good and bad, don't be too sad. I know a friend who is so miserable. He looks like a magnificent person, has good knowledge, talent, and practice is even more powerful. Sun Daochong is the 5th person in the world who can't be beaten by thunder, but this person is the 11th person at the bottom of the list. By coincidence, he doesn't have to be on the list every time. He is a close friend with Na Yaxiang Yaoqing and he has taken a lot of immortality for himself. The Taoist name is only a lot more than that of the Aizhou Island Weishi. Guess what his real name is?" The child shook his head. Lu Xian laughed loudly, "It's called Zhu Dezhuang." The child was almost out of breath when he looked at the young Daoist. He didn't know what was ridiculous. Isn't it normal to have such a name? Besides, it's a good thing to have a name and a surname anyway. As for the content that is not understood, the child feels like he is listening to the heavenly scriptures. Lu Xian finally stopped laughing and rubbed his stomach. But nowadays there are not many people who know his name. Peng Dao happens to be one of them. This person was born in Shijing Tuzi. Before climbing and practicing there was a mantra. "Can you kill meat if you live for 100 years? Wait until this person has attained Taoism. He is still in a high position and he is still a hot temper. When encountering people who are not pleasing to the eye, the unpleasant thing is just that the word 100 is changed to 1,000. Moreover, the way of discussing Taoism with people is the only one in Qingming. Either you kill me or I kill you, or he chooses to stand still and let the other party bomb the magic arts. He didn't start until his aura was exhausted and his skills were exhausted. And as long as the opponent doesn't nod his head, he won't do anything. So there was a fight which lasted 300 years. The former was just a fairy at first, and he was abruptly on the way of fighting and became an ascendant monk. In the end, 300. Getting along day and night in the year like a shadow, was so forced to go crazy. Rao people are not idiots, and idiots will not forgive others. Lu Xian picked up a branch, twisted his wrists to draw a talisman, and shook the pen to loosen the beads. The spirit is out of the dust, the spirit is strange. Lu Xian asked casually, do you know that he is a fool? The child's eyes are low and his expression is sad. Only listen to the young Taoist leader comforting. How can a fool know that he is a fool? Think about it for yourself, is it true? Before someone passed by here, he gave the child a light pat on the back to help pat the overwhelmed old accounts, like turning a page in the old almanac. The child seems to be resuscitated all at once. Lu Xian lost the branch, clapped his palms, smiled and said, there are roughly 2 types of fools, both of which can be regarded as idiots. First of all, I declare that I have told you that this is not a derogatory term, nor is it a complimentary term. Can't listen, understand the meaning of commendation and derogation? To put it simply, there is no difference between good and bad words, just a common saying. One is the previous you, confused like dreaming alone. Only you know this dream and you don't know anything about people outside the dream, so you will be treated as a fool by the outsider. There is also a kind of idiots, those who are cultivators, that is, the so-called mountain gods in the book. They have to abandon the 7 emotions and 6 desires that we are born with in order to prove the longevity of the Tao and pursue longevity and the harmony of the sky. There is a world, there is only Tao Fa, no more people around. In the eyes of the poor Tao, this is a dream of the world, everyone is having the same dream. Since it is born, then abandon the lust, this matter is its heavens not to take. Of course, some people regard it as a kind of debt repayment. Only when the debts are cleared can we welcome the heavenly tribulation refreshingly, because in these people's eyes, the heavenly tribulation that broke the realm is God. Renting for many years requires interest. The so-called natural Taoist species and immortal fetuses almost have one thing in common, that is, they are inhuman. Many people who have practiced mountaineering since childhood, more or less have this fairy aura on their bodies. Their eyes are cold, their temperament is cold, and their bones are cold. Away from the red dust, living alone in the land of the abbot or a small futon, or a small heart fast, repair a golden branch and jade leaf, make a liver and intestines like snow. The monks in the world can call Chengdu an idiot. It is estimated that only Lu Xian can speak it out. I'm never afraid of being beaten anyway. Lu Xian moved his butt, picked up the branch he had thrown back and wrote a word on the ground, Lang, hesitated a little and added another word, He. Lu Xian asked with a smile, which word do you think is more relevant? The child looked serious, looked down at the 2 words and didn't want to lie. After raising his head, he looked embarrassed and said, it's all good to look at. Recognizes 2 words again. Lu Xian hey laughed. Very good, the name is Yelong. I will set foot on the road in the future, even the road number will be called Hojua. Are all people who have not awakened in Huayan, only to see who is the first to realize the big dream. The sleep, the awakening. Different accents, 1 word, 2 meanings. Lu Xian held the branch, pointed at the Jew, smiled and said, with this word alone, we are going to give the ancestor 1,000 beatings. Looking at the child in front of him, it was hard for Lu Xian not to miss that boy in Mud Bottle Alley. Presumably for them, going to the grave on Tomb Sweeping Day, watching the moon on Mid-Autumn Festival, and dinner on the 30th New Year's Eve are all 3 major concerns. Lu Xian sighed. The country and the mountains are the master of impermanence, and there is no definite evidence for the current and ancient scenery. There are only old trees, but only big trees. Have we ever heard of ancient grasses and seen big grasses? The plants die in autumn and the pines and cypresses live forever. This is fate. Jilan is in charge and Yushu is born. This is fate. People have fate and go with the fate like a leaf of duckweed into the sea. The child's eyes were shining and he couldn't understand it at all. He just thought it was more knowledgeable. It seemed more interesting than the teacher in the village school. So he admired it very much and asked softly, "Dao master, you know so much. Have you been a schoolmaster?" Lu Qian waved his hand quickly. If you don't come, I'm not much better than you. You're just eating and drinking in your hometown. I'm just cheating and drinking in a foreign country. I have a shallow way. How dare you call yourself a husband? If it's just the kind of gentleman who teaches and solves puzzles, of course it's not that Lu Qian didn't come, just disdainful of it. By Yujing's 5th city on the 12th floor, each has a master, only 3 heads teach Lu Xian, almost never preaching for anyone like to go to the house, go to other places to audit. There are occasional exceptions, but unfortunately it is not good for outsiders. But it is the man who wears the lotus head toward the Big Dipper, and I say longevity for the star. Is just Lu Qian's words to Mr. with his own comments. Sanhua Juding is only a real person and Wuchi Chaoyuan is a god. Gentlemen? But it was born innately. The child asked, "What is the name of the Daoist chief? Can I go to the Daoist chief in the future?" Being favored by others, you always have to pay back as much as you can pay back, and there can only be more. As for how this principle came about, the child has never thought about it and may not think about it too much. Lu Xian smiled knowingly. What is Tao and what is reason? It's what we walk on the invisible road under our feet, and we can't speak but practice for it. It's so difficult to talk to people rationally because the way is different. Lu Qian smiled and said, "My name is just too much. The Zheng who bought the caskets and returned the pearls, the Nangua who was indiscriminately, the Luoqi who was worried by Luoqi, the worries off worry about charcoal and wishing the sky to be cold. The potter of 10 fingers do not touch the mud scales in the building. But today the poor Dao's name is Su Wugue. New Year's Eve he will soon leave the old and welcome the new. Please be a good omen. I hope that there will be no lonely wild ghost in the world, and there is nothing in the sky outside the sky. There is a way for life and death." Moreover, the name Su Wugue is a character in a book compiled by Fan Dao. Xianxia. He is proficient in Xiangma and is best at picking kalma. Farmers go to the fields, merchants make money, and Su Wugue Xiangma must get up early. The child was shocked by the words of the young Daoist chief. Daoist Su has written and published books? Misters of the village school can only teach. Lu Xian triumphantly rubbed his chin, smiled and said, "It's easy to talk and talk." Remember that back then there was a similar look. It turns out that besides setting up a stall and making money, he would prescribe prescriptions. Perhaps everyone has an unbearable lake of slips in their hearts, and probably everyone has a lingering mud bottle alley in their hearts. The only place where you are down is my hometown. I don't see the ancients before and the people who come later. I have a drunken face with peach blossoms and my tears burst into tears. The sky is thundering and booming. Lu Xian smiled and said, "Look up." The words and the law followed, and a thunderbolt suddenly sounded in the sky. The child was taken aback. He looked up blankly and looked at the young Taoist master. Lu Xian put his fingers together, tapped the child's eyebrows lightly, muttering words on his mouth. It is like opening the eyes of the sky for this child. From this moment on, this rural orphan surnamed Yi may have officially embarked on the path of spiritual practice. Only after he left, he learned the talisman on the ground again. Then the child's future eyes, if he gains the magical power of looking at the air, can clearly see the ancestors' Yin and Yin virtues and blessings and luck, such as an old saying circulating in the market. To say that a person's popularity is exhausted is the same, and it is the same to describe a person who is in fortune. Another example is the man in the blue yarn. Of course it will prosper. Lu Xian then twisted his wrists and rubbed his fingers together, such as lighting a stick of fragrant incense, and the censer on the child's head, as if worshipping 3 feet above his head, is another amulet given to the child by Lu Qian. It is a celestial talisman, as if it was given the name Wugue. Lu Qian squatted on the ground, shook his arms back and forth and shook his body back and forth. He smiled and said, "When I leave my hometown one day in the future, I will find a mountain called Shenzongzong. When I see the Taoist priest named Qizhen, you will said that he was Lu Qian who asked you to climb the mountain and let him teach you the magic of the immortal family." The child nodded but curiously asked, "Dao Master changed his name again?" Lu Xian stood up and smiled. 3-day banquet, 100-day banquet. After all, there is no permanent banquet, just leave it here, there will be a period later. The child seemed to have 1,000 words stuck in his mouth. He didn't know what to say. In the end he just remembered the previous etiquette. He went with this young Taoist leader who was very knowledgeable and once published a book and went to a Taoist chief. Lu Chen stood on the spot. After receiving the gift, he strode away without looking back but waved goodbye to the child. The young master looked around a few times, walked to the side of the village, bent over and ransacked a chicken. He got up, held it in his arms and rushed away. After a few efforts he disappeared. Only a stunned child was left and the Daoist stole the chicken and ran away. Is he a helper looking out for the wind? Town demon building under the plane tree. This young fellow has a real body, handsome in appearance and difficult to distinguish between male and female. The Yin who came out of the aperture was the one who followed Chen Pingon, wearing a power fence and wearing a green robe with a graceful posture. No wonder he would be mistaken for a female cultivator. The other Xianxia's body is the appearance of a burly old man with white hair. Here Qing Tong gathered the of Yang. As for the of Yin who traveled far from the orifice, it was a blessing. I ate a bowl of plain noodles at Zhou Xian at the moment, but I didn't know why I went to Fen's shrine. Qing Tong had nothing to do, twisting a strand of blue silk on the temples with both hands repeatedly, and found that Xiao had been keeping the head-up position, holding the green bamboo stick lying horizontally on his knees with both hands, staring at the sky in a daze, as if the thoughts had been moving towards the sky. Spread away, immersed in it. Qing Tong is very self-aware and doesn't think that Xiao is so distracted by thinking of herself as a friend, that even the Dharma image seems a bit sluggish. This shows that Xiao is thinking about a very important thing. But for Xiao, who is now the dead man next to Chen Pingon, can there be more important things than protecting the Tao at the moment? There are only two possibilities. Outside the town demon building, there is a powerful enemy trying to spy on this side, waiting for an opportunity, and it is the kind of big monk who even Qing Tong can't detect the clues. There is one possibility left, that is, Xiao has fallen into a kind of spiritual situation similar to the opportunity of breaking. Xiao is indeed wandering infinitely far away. The monster sword repairman who lived in the world after 10,000 years thought of the many scrolls of 10,000 years ago. They were tragic and magnificent, or weird or extremely mysterious. The picture was finally fixed there. The still familiar ascending platform where he thought about it, Xiao revisited as he did before. Following that path, his sight went up all the time, and finally an uncontrollable thought came out in his heart. I hand out a sword here which is equivalent to paving a road. In the end, this sword of light is the road to the sky. The strength of this sword aura, should I have never seen it in the future generations who have slept soundly among the bright moon and bright color for thousands of years? So this is a way to enter the 14th realm. After Xiao had this thought and became more determined in the small world of his body, there was a vision. The roots and bones are like mountains, thousands of mountains worship the grass house, and the bloodlines are like rivers and rivers. Each big mansion, meridian, sword chi, sword intent, road, that is, kendo and avenue, all began to show signs of resonance between the earth and the earth. A small-minded little Emo came to an empty realm of his own world, no longer in the costume of the yellow hat and blue shoes, but like the face outside holding a sword. Because once you set foot on this road and walk this road, it means that Xiao has no turning back. Once you fail, the consequences will be extremely serious. If you are not careful, you will seriously damage the route and you may even fall directly. This is why a mountain monk who has ascended to perfection regards the 14 realms one step away as a heavenly moat. Is also why there are some great monks who are famous all over the world. Otherwise, it is like Na Wei Shi, unable to break through the boundary, and the Tao heart is covered in dust, and since then the will is depressed and he feels helpless. Otherwise, any ascending cultivator who does not have great perseverance, the tenacity of Tao Exin, all of them are beyond ordinary people's imagination. We are indeed this way, which is different from the usual hiking trails. The female cultivators Chaoga re-examined in the Qingming world, and the female crown who Qin Pingon had met in riverside discussions. Her name is Wuzhou and the Taoist name is Taiyin. The method of harmony in our continent was once called refining things by Wu Shuangjiang, and was likened to dismemberment by Lu Chen. The degree of danger just heard by others knows. The reason why they are mistaken for being dead is that they have been in retreat for too long. But at this moment, a voice suddenly sounded in Xiao Mo's heart, and the other party first called Xiao Mo's real name and then said, "Daoist Hai Zhu, it's late, I'm afraid you have to change your way." The man continued, "Actually, you are not long late than the sword fairy who is one step ahead. It is equivalent to taking a nap in the mountains, which is a pity. What a heavenly beard-long sword. Although Xiaomo already knew the identity of the other party, he still asked 2 questions. Is this person already in the 14th realm or not yet in the 14th realm? And is this person a good friend on the mountain with my son? If it is not a friend of the sun, the other party has not yet truly entered the 14th realm. My little Mo cares whether you cross the threshold of the 14th realm with 1 foot? Even if the opponent is already in the 14th realm, it does not matter, then we will have a great battle, and the 2 sides are equivalent to asking the sword from a distance. As a result, the person smiled and said, it's true that he is already in the 14th realm, but only 3 people know about it for the time being, and this person happens to have a relationship with Qin Pingon or a New Year, and he likes to call Qin Pingon as Qin Xiaoyu. Of course, Xiaomo would not think that the other party would be joking about this kind of thing. First, he thanked the half-old person from the bottom of his heart. Since he was the first to walk out of this path and had succeeded, it was the Taoist master son of Xiandu Temple. Then Xiaomo had to change the road, or else the flood would wash away the Dragon King Temple and he would only lose out. Xiaomo sighed and had to forcibly suppress the majestic road scene, put away a grain of mind and withdrew from Zhou Xian. Xiaomo, in yellow hat and blue shoes, held the green bamboo stick lying horizontally on his knees with both hands. His face was pale, his throat moved slightly and he swallowed the blood abruptly. Qing Tong looked terrified, Dao Exen trembled and asked, what's the matter? Could it be that in this town's demon building, there are powerful enemies hiding in it but you don't even notice it? And this person hurt Xiaomo? Xiaomo was too lazy to talk, but when he thought of the other party's Yinshen who was still in a state of wandering together with the sun, he said, the Holy Master is staring at us here. It's no wonder that there was something wrong before, but there was no trace of it. The whole world is a dojo of 1 person plus this scholar, it is another 15 realm. The ancient heaven, the 5 highest, all are the 15th realms in the eyes of later generations of Qi practitioners. As a result, the battle between water and fire caused 2 of the supreme gods to have cracks in their respective golden bodies. The sword-bearer rebelled, causing the armored man to fall into the mansion like a wooden support. But all the monks who have personally experienced or watched the war with their own eyes, everyone knows that the only real variable is actually only one thing. Is the co-master of the court missing? In the battle of turning newcomers for old masters, from beginning to end, the supreme co-lord of the heavens and the world did not even show up. In the past years, there was also a saying that was not widely circulated. The realm of existence may be above the 15th realm. Sword of Coming Chapter 937. On the Fen Shrine, Qin Pingon and Qing Tong looked at the sceneries with their own emphasis, so they looked at each one and separated them in order. When Qing Tong finished visiting many halls and pavilions, it was discovered that Qin Pingon was no longer in this Hebo temple. Walking out of the temple gate, Qing Tong saw a green shirt, sitting on a small bamboo chair in the shade of the willow by the big pond, and began to throw a rod and go fishing. Qing Tong walked over and asked, are there any bamboo chairs? Qin Pingon stretched out his finger to his mouth, motioned to make a small sound, and then twisted his wrist to create a small green bamboo chair and handed it to Qing Tong. Qing Tong sat aside, lowered his voice and asked in confusion, this is? Qin Pingon smiled and said, just wait for the weather. Seeing Qing's confusion, Qin Pingon lifted his chin and reminded, temporarily as a water view. Qing Tong stared at the water. The pool water was like a mirror, and a dilapidated mansion appeared in the mirror. It's not a very clever way to see the magical powers of the mountains and rivers. After parting from the children in the village, the young Taoist priest with bulging arms stood up from the ground, hovered in the air on tiptoe and glanced towards the inside of the city. Hey, there are some signs of filthy evil spirits and immortal fighting. Could it be a ghost house? I don't know if today's poor Dao is called Su Wugui. Well, if you discuss it well, you can keep the well water from the river. If you don't even want to borrow a kitchen room from the poor Dao, then it's no wonder that the poor Dao will do Tianxing Dao once. Lu Qin turned his head and glanced at the child surnamed Yi. He was about to come to the divine god sect. Maybe he could be a companion with the little Taoist named Ayu in Qiuhaoguan, practice and grow together, and after a long time he would be a friend. Bi-monthly friends are so rare in this vast world where there is only one bright moon, so you should cherish your true friends more and more. Lu Qin stepped out and went directly to the street outside the door of a haunted house. After pinching his fingers, he knew that the nearby land was called Wuzenfang. The temple's incense was broken long ago. In history it was demolished and rebuilt into a private residence. Afterwards it was repeatedly changed. Many ghosts were causing trouble. In the end, most of the beams and timbers of the house were moved to the Fen shrine outside the city. There is only one stone lion, and on the neck there is a series of tiny potholes like bead imprints. This place turned out to be the former site of the temple dedicated to the pure sun Daoist, which was unexpected and reasonable. Lu Chen sighed. Chunyang Dao, I used to be in Bai Yujing. We were both from hometown and we were in different places. Now you haven't been in Howren's hometown for a long time, and it's hard to have an ancestral temple. Unexpectedly, I have fallen to this point. Fortunately, I will do my best to add a little incense to your temple. I just don't know where Lu Yan is now, and there has been no news from Lu Yan in the Qingming world for a long time. Lu Chen took out a talisman made of huangxi from his sleeve and muttered, "Heavenly spirit and earth spiritual spirit. I can do it if the gods show their spirits." Stepped back, shook his dantian posture with one hand, gave a light drink and walked forward like flying forward. One toe hit the ground and jumped high, but it just happened to step on the top of the wall. I couldn't stand up after shaking it a few times. One fell back and landed on the street again. The street was deserted at the moment. No one can see this funny scene. I saw the young Taoist priest holding a yellow talisman, tried twice and finally squatted on the wall, got up and walked along the wall, tiptoe climbed over a ridge, stretched his neck, and saw after a fierce fight, several wild Xiao who seemed to be from the same school, each showing their magical powers, were fighting a pale-faced woman in a red dress. It was vaguely visible that there was a piece of rope tied to her neck, which was probably a hanged ghost. Babbling, black smoke billowing, and being broken up one by the elders who came to slay demons and slaying demons by means of ingenious techniques. Generally speaking, one party throws out the magic fairy magic. With sneaky tricks, it is wonderful it can be regarded as the opponent will meet Liang Kai. Lu Chen sat quietly on the ridge of the roof looking away. There was a peony in the backyard which was transplanted from another place. After several dynasties after it became a refined shape, he was not young. He was about half the owner of this place. Helping the unjust dead, terrorizing the people in the sun, occupying this large mansion, it seems that there is nothing wrong with it. At most it is to abduct the young and strong wine clubs and watchmen who do not return at night and bring them here. After a cloud and rain, steal some yang energy and then throw it out of the house at dawn. It's no wonder that the god of water at Fen Shrine chose to turn a blind eye to everything that happened in this mansion with a lot of history. For one thing, he didn't make any unreasonable actions. If you want to defeat this ghost house, you have to mobilize troops and condemn the generals. When the two sides completely tear their faces and let go of their hands and feet, at least the county town will not be able to keep it. In addition, the nearby city temple and the gods of the mountains and rivers can be used. And the soldiers and horses under their command, it is estimated that they are really going to be more vigorous, and they will only come raging and questioning, and they will go back to the house with a gray head and face. In the courtyard, one of the two parties, one of whom had sharp eyes, saw the sneaky young Taoist priest over the roof and suddenly cursed, "The little bull nose, how dare you come here to grab business with the uncle? Get away." I saw the righteousness of the young Taoist priest and said awe-inspiringly, "Since ancient times the Taoist people have a share of the demon and evil spirits. What's more, the poor Dao is born with a strong iron bone and a chivalrous heart." The man shouted, "Noisy." A dart flicked out of the sleeve. It was as fast as a shooting star, but the tail of the dart hit the mother-in-law Taoist's forehead. Hearing a pain, the young Taoist was caught and fell back on the ground. Rolling all the way on the roof ridge, disappeared. The female ghost with a rope around her neck in the courtyard turned over and over again to the ghost tricks. But the other party was crowded and powerful, and the man who was cultivating the Taoist body was also a man. She was full of yang, gathered together, and her momentum appeared. Quite majestic, she gradually lost the wind and immediately turned her head and shouted, "Sister, come and help me." Soon there was another blue smoke floating in, condensed into the figure of a female ghost, and she was also a woman, covered in blue silks in a bun, wandering like water weeds, presumably a poor man who was drowned. Lu Chen had already found the stove and kicked the door open, preparing to start a fire and cooking. He can't treat himself badly. He had to have a good New Year's Eve dinner here before going to Qingming World. Bai Yujing didn't pay attention to this. There was too much wind in Xianxia and too little human touch. Seeing that the chopping board and everything were ready, Lu Chen took out the fire fold from his sleeve and found the bamboo tube that was blowing the fire. Sitting on a bench, Lu Chen muttered, "This is still the daytime scene. The Lord hasn't even appeared yet. If you don't have the help of the poor road, how can you fight? Even if you kneel on the ground and shout for help, you will have to see that the poor road has not eaten enough and has no energy. Just bend around." On the way, Lu Chen noticed that there were 2 big locust trees in the backyard with very thick shades of green. Not far from the stove there was a small building with a foot deep. There were a few coffins inside and the coffin panels were all open. They were all withered bones that had no place to be buried. Lu Chen didn't shy away from these anyway. Otherwise, among the 7 minds of the 3 palms, how could there be a real man with white bones? Someone leaned against the door of the stove. She was a pretty girl, blushing and charming. The girl pursed her red lips, clapped her palms lightly, and gave a feed to remind the young Daoist that someone is coming, and then squinted and smiled. "You little Daoist, you are not considered a master of art, and you dare come here to open a stove and cook. You say that you want to find a good place to die. What do you think? It's those strange and novels that cheat money." This girl came here without knowing it. She almost scared a person to death. I really thought that scaring a person would not pay for my life. Fortunately, I am a fairy and courageous. Lu Chen smiled and spoke, sitting on the small bench, turning around, lifting the bamboo tube in his hand, pointing to the yellow paper talisman sticking to the door of the stove, and looking at the young girl with refined peony. With a chance and her 800 or 900 years of cultivation, she is considered invincible in the nearby counties and counties. She is not considered a prestige here, just helping those female ghosts to continue their lives. Keep things a bit, otherwise those female ghost sisters who just need to be a little bit cruel just have a mouth or twist a few waist. Those young and strong men who are happy here, I am afraid they will only there was a skin bag with an empty inside and a loose young. Even if it was thrown out of the ghost house, it would be dead soon. The girl stretched out her hand and wanted to take off the talisman of ordinary material, but the talisman was touched by her fingertips, and she felt a distressed burning feeling. She struck a spirit, immediately stopped her hand and weighed it. Adhering to the tenet of carefully sailing the ship for 10,000 years, Yen Ran smiled. "As long as you don't be nosy today and stay as you please. Those in the courtyard, I didn't provoke them, they broke into the dojo and asked me for trouble. Obviously it's not the kind of people who give up, since they are anxious to reincarnate one by one. I can't blame me for sending them off the boat." When the young Taoist priest saw this, he looked smug and laughed. "How do you know that it's amazing? This talisman is a masterpiece of the trail. One of the tricks. Just ask if you are afraid." The girl twitched her lips. "Dare to ask this Immortal Long, what is his name? How old is it?" The young Taoist priest had a disgusting expression on his face. "I don't understand the rules. The monk doesn't speak his name or his life, but in the name of Xian Chong, Xiao Dao can reveal a secret for you." The girl nodded and said, "Listen with good ears." The young Taoist coughed a few times and moisturized his throat, and then he straightened his waist and said loudly, "Qian Kun Suda has no name, evacuated a husband from the world. A real hero with a strong character, a savage and solitary, living only on the top of a mountain. The morning meal, Xianxia night drinking dew, is the most upright and refreshing. No one knows about the wall for 100 years. The golden crow fire wrapped the golden core, formed the golden core, made the furnace, made the yang Xinyu Yujing, learned the immortal and learned the baby. The moon is the cold pool is quiet, the bottom of the sea is breathing and the sky is soaring. I have forgotten to prove it for thousands of years. The blue bird on the horizon can also be tied to the sky. A dream in the ant locust." At first, the girl listened attentively, but soon she raised her hand and yawned, and she was telling the story. "But your sour words don't seem to rhyme too much." The young Taoist priest seemed to see her thoughts and said without embarrassment, "Girl, you only need to understand what you mean. This is called ecstasy. As for rhyming, it is very minor and quite trivial." The girl suddenly said sternly, "I changed my mind. I was just looking at you annoying, but it turned out to be even more annoying, so I didn't keep guests and I left here quickly. Don't change your attention, the poor surname is Su Mingwuguai. As for the Dao name, the aptitude in the mountain is still low, and the experience outside the mountain has not been long, and he has not been able to accumulate 3,000 merits and consummation. There is no Dao name yet." The young Taoist also looked anxiously. "In addition, there is a rule in the poor Dao line. saying that the ancestor does not speak the teacher. So if you ask about the ancestors of the Shao Dao, there is no comment on the Dao lineage. When the girl heard this, her anger was suppressed and she just sneered, "That's like a teacher," and she moved out of the master name, so I can't scare people. The young Taoist priest seemed to be annoyed and said, "Can't you scare people? Ghosts scare you to death." The girl glanced at the other party's crown, waved her hand. "Let's go, don't join in the fun here. If you weren't looking at the face of the road in the past, at least you would go in and go out vertically today. I have to make you remember a little bit. Since the Taoism is not good enough and the skills are not good, don't think that you have the backing of a teacher and you feel that there are no taboos and you can go everywhere. There are people outside and you will suffer a lot." The girl Qiubo turned around, pointed a finger at the crown of the young Taoist priest and smiled with one hand. "Move out of the teacher's door quickly so as to calm me, Aunt Grandma? Then don't you know I and your ancestors and elders are still good friends?" "Good old friend." I saw the handsome Taoist priest with red lips and white teeth. He heard the words as if he had been struck by thunder. "How can you know that the old things happened hundreds of years ago? Leave this place and return to the Taoist temple in the mountains. The guy named Long Weishenren is him. He has no conscience. He is a thief and guilty thing. I don't think I am from a righteous background and dare not bring it back to the mountain. What if the vegetation has become the essence of life? Zhong Tushen's how long there is also a Foxian Hall in the Heavenly Master's mansion in Hushan. She is not as good as mine." The girl looked faint and turned it over the old account. She was a little depressed and waved her hand. "Okay, I already knew that you came from that high gods, otherwise you wouldn't wear this kind of crown on your head. Your status as a Taoist priest is of course. Really, but I am not those ignorant mountain spirits. The Taoist priests who know your line and the authentic ones there and the Qi Tianjun are not the same Taoist priest at all. The incense is withered to a mess and they are mixed with the gods. It's getting bleak year by year and I can only live by selling private condoms." The young Taoist priest also sighed. "I was really hit by the girl. It was a bleak situation that was not as good as that year." The girl said, "Isn't leaving yet? Really think that a broken talisman on the door can block me?" Lu Chen smiled and said, "The old saying goes that helping others is helping oneself. Going out to rely on friends, Xiaodao is just borrowing a place to have a New Year's Eve dinner. Maybe it can help you escape." Having said this, Lu Chen said with a smile, "This old saying and that common saying, no matter what is behind, we better have to listen to it." The girl sneered and said, "Little Taoist priest, do you know what realm auntie I am?" Lu Chen looked shocked and said, "Couldn't it be an old who is introverted and concealed?" The girl was short-tempered because she was a golden immortal. Only He Bo of the Fen shrine outside the city and the county town god temple only mistaken her for a Sevuing vegetation spirit, so she has not been famous. The main reason is that Mengliang has 2 immortal mansions on the hills, which made her extremely jealous. If she hadn't had a hidden life-saving charm, she would have been detained by the immortal master in the mountains for a long time. In this holy house, there are naturally female ghosts, but the evil that is really suppressed is actually an old golden core ghost. In addition to the extremely high level of Taoism, the intention is extremely insidious. It was the secret plan of the early years. Through it was only by the hands of the Yangjian officials that Lu Gong's temple was torn down and occupied this feng shui treasure place as a dojo, in order to become the nascent soul by this. Even a peony plant was deliberately transplanted here, with the fragrance of the flower, to cover up its incomparable evil spirit. The reason why the heartless man named Qian Tongxian stopped here was because he found something wrong with the mansion. To surrender this evil ghost, first form a big formation to prevent the innocent from hurting the innocent, and then fight with the golden core ghosts. Not hesitate to smash 2 mortal creatures, hurt the roots of the road and suppress the ghosts deep underground. In a secret room where he was sealed up with a talisman, he said that he had returned to the gods, and he would invite the elders in the mountains to eradicate this scourge, but he never thought that there would be no day for him to meet again after he left. For so many years, almost every few years, she would use a talisman to learn from the Taoist priest, add a talisman to the door of the secret room deep underground, layer upon layer the old talisman dissipates and there are new ones. Fu posted. Just because of Fulu, the threshold is too high. She only has a little talent for cultivation and she can't really pass it on, so she can only win by quantity. Once upon a time, before and after the flowers, the stars in the sky revolve and the curtains on the earth hang down. Living in the mountains does not count the year, and enjoying the flowers is the immortal. The speaker just speaks on the lips, but the listener has to engrave it in his heart. Lu Chen embraced the burning bamboo tube, his eyes softened and he smiled. The battle outside is not small. Then Bo Yixiu is going to win this door and he is determined to win. The girl has also noticed it. The other party has already offered a killer and can't ask God to surrender. True, even though they are two lingering Yinxi gods, it is obviously more than enough to deal with the 3 female ghost sisters under your hand. Besides, you, the golden pill, can protect your true body and guard it. Do you live in that blocked door? Anyway, Pang Dao finds it difficult, it's hard. The girl's expression changed slightly and she was about to go to rescue. Unexpectedly, the young Taoist priest just took a breath, and the yellow paper talisman on the door of the stove fell down, just falling on the girl's shoulder. The girl seemed to have been affixed with a fixed charm, a dignified golden core immortal. No matter how the golden core was operated to control the aura, she could not move half a step. Lu Chen put his face on the bamboo tube, looked at the anxious girl, smiled and said, "What's the hurry, just watch a good show. There are not many other people but there are many friends on the mountain. By coincidence there will be one today." The 2 lines of cause and effect that affect the body before are one person and one thing, one thickness and the other thin. The latter is the child and the former is an old friend. This person was originally not in a hurry, but now he has noticed the clues, and he has begun to travel here quickly and quickly. The girl didn't move at all, she could only watch the young Taoist priest who was busy with a New Year's Eve dinner. Her hands and feet were swift, and she was as skilled as a Taoist priest who specializes in cooking. Being a man can't treat yourself badly. 2 jugs of wine. 3 hard vegetables were prepared. A pot of stewed old hen, a pot of winter bamboo shoots stewed with bacon, and a large plate of steamed crabs. The young Taoist priest also drew out a set of 9 famille rose flowers from his sleeve, but it was only filled with lychees, not fresh lychees but dried lychees. Bamboo shoots are stunners in vegetables and vegetables, lychee is stunner in fruits, crabs are stunners in aquariums, and wine is a stunner in diet. 4 stunners, 1 table is complete. Outside the Fen shrine by the pool, Qin Pingon has never caught a fish. Qing Tong looked at the picture scroll in the water and said in surprise, "It turned out to be him? It stands to reason that this person should never show up here. No wonder Luzhang Church came here, it turned out to be a nostalgia." Qin Pingon smiled and said, "Do you recognize it again?" Qing Tong said in a bad mood, "This person is both the master of Sui Right and her martial arts master, how could I not know him? Besides, this person is still the Lu Xing, who once walked in Handan Daozhua and was being spotted by the Taoist Chunyang." Qin Pingon asked, "Then do you know what he did after he left a Hua Fudi and chose to hide his name in Yunku Fudi for so many years?" Qing Tong shook his head and said, "I dare not say more about things related to the old master." Qin Pingon changed his question. "As for the inheritance of Taoist Loguan school of incense, as well as the ancestor clan of the surname Shao, the name of the county hall and the migration distribution, do you have any relevant records or books on hand?" Qing Tong said, "It's really not there. The Taoist tradition of Jinding Temple originated from the Taoist Loguan school. Taoist priests used to call pavilions in ancient places, forming buildings with grass and watching the stars. The first watchman of the Loguan school happened to be named Shao. The status of this watcher is similar to that of the first Buddhist temple today, second only to the abbot. Cui Dongshan first guessed that Ni Yuanzhan was hiding in the blessed land of the Cloud Cave in order to give the golden pill to the right side of Sui, one of the former disciples. So among the 4 people in the picture scroll in the past years, Sui right side gave up the martial arts future. Not long after she arrived in Hauran, she insisted on going her own way, turned her head and ran to practice the sword, and it made sense. But facts have proved that this is not the case. Sui right side is not the person who has been predestined to get the pill. Afterwards, Jiang Shangzhen mistakenly thought that Ni Yuanzhan was planning to present this golden pill to the Northern Golden Temple, which has a great relationship with the Old Temple. He decided to stop him and even made a ruthless word with Lao Zhouzi. As long as Xiao Yuanran came to Huanggeji to get the pill, he Jiang Shangzhen would let the young man of the Daquan dynasty die under Ni Yuanzhan's eyelids. But if the old boat dared to send the pill, he would make Xiao Yuanran a fateful pill. Complete a pair of merits without missing the body, but did not have the life to go homeopathic and enter the nascent soul realm. Qin Pingon asked with a smile. "About the old master of that golden core, fellow Daoists, can you always talk about it?" Qing Tong hesitated for a moment, carefully brewing his words. chose some old calendars that could be spoken and slowly said, "This fellow Taoist, the true body is the first crane in the world, and it is said that he is still a 14th person who is only half a step away." Realm Great Monk. Before he fell, to be precise, he took a trip to Bixiao Cave and Luobao Beach before the retreat. After the retreat failed, he left a complete golden pill. The old master looked like he was taking care of it on his behalf. This is because Qing Tong thinks about Mr. Zheng, and is willing to talk more about the inside story that can't be bought with money. Qin Pingon corrected, "It might be more accurate to say that it is guardian. Because this ancient golden pill is not in the hands of the master of Laoguan, it is located between the cliffs of Huanggeji in the blessed land of Yunku, and it is far away from a Guandao temple separated by Banzhou mountains and rivers. And this golden pill can be regarded as a great mountain treasure of the rank of fairy soldiers, and it can be regarded as a kind of extremely rare kind of fairy soldiers. Just like the golden robe that Qin Pingon obtained from Jailonga back then, among the half-celestial soldiers, it is outstanding, and Qin Ping's silly sword, which was later lent to the right of Sui, appears to stand out among the magic weapons. The root lies in the word, growth. Able to keep tempering and then improve the rank. It is like the cultivation of human beings, breaking the realm one by one. Thinking of this, Qin Pingon suddenly said, "It seems that the word Xianxia inverted the order is growth. It's just that Qing Tong now has the most headache of these empty talks. Think about it. It is destined to not figure out why. Don't think about it. It seems that you will miss something. The rank of the monk's golden core, to a large extent, determines the great achievement of an immortal. It is similar to the so-called 3-year-old people. Of course it is not absolute, there are always special cases, but the reason why common sense is that there are no exceptions. Just like Qin Ping himself, he was not favored before because his life porcelain was broken, and he was looked to death early. After that, he was able to get to where he is today." Qin Pingon asked, "Why would Jiang Shangzhen borrow the sword with Ni Yuan Pin?" In Yunku Fudi, Jiang Shangzhen once said, "I want to borrow Mr. S sword today and I will spit light in the dark." But Ni Yuanzhan denied it, and his expression did not seem to be fake. According to Jiang Shangzhen, the reason why he spent his time in the lotus roots was to help Lu Feng rank among the top 10 people in the world. It is best to rank high, and then he can let his best friend Lu Feng take advantage of the opportunity to obtain a handy weapon. Qing Tong was silent. This matter really cannot be said. Once the secret is broken, Qing Tong is worried that he will always look at the master and turn the old account. The prudent eyes and unforgiving of the Bixiao cave master were once recognized by the world. Qin Pingon thought of Jiang Shangzhen's comment on Ni Yuan Pin's, "You are a sword," and couldn't help but smile. His own chief of the week just can talk. Qing Tong was silent for a long time, probably because he was also worried about being held hostage by the person next to him, and tentatively said, "I saw Lu Xing later, ask yourself?" Qin Pingon said, "What's hard to guess?" Ni Yuan Pin can actually be regarded as half a chi practitioner in Uwafudi. He has opened up a brand new path, which is refining the sword with the body. Jiang Shangzhen said that Ni Yuan Pin is proficient in the 3 teaching questions, www. Novel. Countless, but is suppressed by the avenues of the blessed lotus roots, so that a clear Taoist heart has only a prototype, and will eventually be accepted by the old master, please out of blessed land. What's more, Lu Chen also leaked secrets and talked about the road to enlightenment of the female champion in our continent. Qing Tong admired him, and he deserved to be Beidasheng Jing Zhongzhong. He really dared to think, really can think. No wonder the absurd question of, "Am I a Taoist ancestor?" is entangled. Qing Tong asked, "I heard that the fishermen who like this way are still paying attention to nesting in advance?" Qin Pingon said, "Usually it is to catch big fish, but it's not a problem to nest in the turbulent water. Just find a pile of rocks and you can gather fish." Qing Tong asked tentatively, "Does this statement have any deep meaning?" Qin Pingon said, "It doesn't mean anything to you. If you listen to Lu Qin and Ni Yuan Pin, you'll probably feel sad." Qing Tong did not refute anything. Qin Pingon lifted the rod again to disperse the bait, and then threw the rod into the water again. But in the courtyard of the former Lugong temple site, the clouds rose in an instant, and the 3-headed female ghost instantly fell into the white mist. Looking around, she couldn't see her 5 fingers and looked up again. It was clear that it was not dusk yet, but the moon was in the sky and the ears were faint. They could hear the guard knocking on the clappers and the night sounds like soldiers passing by. The next moment, their vision suddenly opened up and a deep-water long bridge appeared. On the bridge there was a vermilion high-gate mansion and a hall. Towering, 2 corridors lined with forests, the stone outside the door is angry and terrifying, and there is a line of armored soldiers, lined up under the corridor. Frosty halberd is cold, and there are 2 purple-clothed official robes, one of whom is slender. But he was as thin as a firewood, with a white fat and tiny beard with a jade belt around his waist. Behind the 3-headed female ghost standing far away from the mountain, one of the old men and genie and the 2 gods in the temple held their fists and smiled. Yu Lao and the 2 great immortals have taken action. The Dali imperial court once abolished countless imperial temples on a continent. Some of them were in charge and their backgrounds were innocent. Dali often had other arrangements, but after all, there were still some who refused to obey the constraints, especially those from an improper background, and could not stand the Daoist ministry of rights and penalties. Inspecting, they can only give up temples and statues and find a way to steal their lives. Although the foundation is gone, not only the golden body is shaken, but it is also a lot shorter, but it is better than being a big Li. The officials of the 2 rituals and penalties and the monks who accompanied the army overturned the old accounts and smashed the golden body on the spot. And even if it is reduced to a lonely ghost, as long as it can rebuild temples in the mountains and quiet places of those small vassal countries, and get incense, you can reassemble the golden body. Nowadays the Dali court has only half of the country in its heyday. That great blasphemy is the boundary. The entire southern part of Aquarius Island has been restored, and places like Mengliang country and Qingwan country don't dare to stay for a long time, but there are always other places that can be used as shelters. And Yamazawa Yeshio, who started by killing people and overcoming goods, has a ghost gate which is to collect disciples, of course the kind of disciples who enter the house. The master of the church apprentice starved to death? It may even kill the master, so I have to refrain from teaching the killer secretly, and never teach the method of suppressing the bottom of the box, and prevent the disciple from getting the truth, and then let the disciple make a promise to swear a poisonous oath, and then control it with secret techniques. Otherwise, if there are not a few helpers around, it is easy to be weak and difficult to make a lot of money. This is why it is easy to become a genealogical monk, but it is very difficult to become a genealogical master. The old man in brocade clothes was not high in realm. He was just a Sevuing monk, but he was so active that he quickly hooked up with these 2 great immortals, who are really a snake and a jackal. The 2 sides hit it off. The 2 great immortals in Immerse needed the help of this chi trainer to help wading through mountains and rivers, refinding the dojo so as to avoid the Wenwu temple and Qinghuang temple, as well as the righteous gods of mountains and rivers that are enshrined by the courts of various places. In return, the 2 great immortals will help Napshan Zoyexiu solve some minor troubles. Just like today's situation, they are still happy to take action. After catching ghosts and eating ghosts, the 2 great immortals can help the Taoism and temper the golden body. The tall and thin immortal walked onto the long bridge, and after standing still he said in a deep voice, "Those who dare to be undefeated rush into the capital city." Aside from the narration, the fat and big fairy sounded like thunder and said angrily, "Little ghost doing a lot of evil, don't you hurry up and kneel and kowtow?" A hanged ghost who hanged himself and a drowned ghost who threw himself into the water have lost their color. The last female ghost who appeared is the highest relative to Taoism, and her temperament is more tenacious. Knowing that the other party is from the Avinci, she is still sneered and said, "You are from this kind of background and it is even harder to see. Whether it is known by the city and the county or detected by the Fen Shrine, you don't want to get out of this place." It's just that she inevitably feels miserable in her heart. If this dream country still belongs to the Dai dynasty, how can these fleeing gods and goddesses show up? After the old man and genie held his hands, the old was there and smiled and said, "So I said that you have to set up a magic circle at the door to cover your eyes and ears. As for the master of this house, we have probed into reality, and if you die you will be in the Longmen realm. Isn't it true that a peony is born in the charm of flowers? Is she just daring to save you?" At this moment, an old man in Confucian shirt walked into this ancient house on the ruins of Lu Gong Temple, frowned slightly and casually dispersed the clouds. As for the 3 female ghosts, a group of wild cultivators and 2 gods, the old man just didn't see it and traveled here on his own. The earliest main hall of Zhou Xian Temple, the statue of Lu Gong deity enshrined in it, and the colorful paintings from the gods have long been gone. Only through the Xianxia-style glazed roof of the main hall, it is vaguely seen that the shape of the year was not low. The main hall originally hung a plaque inscribed by the emperor's Feng Lei Palace, but it has not been hung for many years. After it was removed, it was finally promoted from the ancestral hall to the palace, and was beaten back to its original form. In the end, even the first ancestral temple could not be maintained. Only a gossip pavilion and a dream character monument outside the pavilion were left. The original appearance seems to be dependent on each other. In fact, there is a hidden mystery in that piece of Mingzi steel, and there is a poem similar to Daoju in the Hollow Seal. What's the explanation for the opening sentence? I am born and die alone, but who knows who is false and who is true? Finally, the old man returned to the main hall of the old Lu Gong temple and twisted 3 sticks of incense from his sleeve. Holding the incense, worshipped for 3 times to pay homage to the Daoist pure yang who taught himself the past and had the grace of preaching. The 2 warriors who were fighting at first were surprised that no one dared to ask a question, let alone hands-on. An old guy who blindly looked at the outside circle and by Wumi who would dare to touch the mold. At the stove room, Lu Qian gently shook his head. The river goes east, the setting sun goes down, and wanderers come south. The Taoist temple is spent, a real person asks who knows for. The girl at the door still stood in place, neither asking for mercy nor just now. There was a table and 2 benches as if he had long legs, swayed from elsewhere and walked over to the stove. After Lu Qian took his seat, he poured himself a bowl of wine, filled a large bowl of rice and put a chopsticks with winter bamboo shoots and exclaimed, "The taste is very good, it's amazing." The old man in Confucian shirt glanced more lazily at the 2 groups of men and horses as if giving orders. All stay where they are, waiting to be sent. Chunyang Taoist Lu Yen is his preacher. Although the 2 sides have no master or apprenticeship, the old scholars always regard Lu Yen as a mentor. Then Chunyang Taoist is the only Lugong temple in this world which has a certain meaning. This is the dojo of mentor Lu Yen. Then he came to the door of the secret room under the ground, and looked at the dense seal of the talisman above. The old scholar laughed dumbly. Did the ghost draw talisman? His figure dissipated, condensed again, and appeared in the secret room without breaking the prohibition of the talisman. The ghost that had been consumed by Fu Lu slowly raised his head, grinning and said, "Looking for death?" The old scholar asked, "Do you know how the words morality is not worthy are written? You are such a sneaky person. If you don't want to hide, you dare to expect to steal Lu Gong's temple for a long time?" Without waiting for the other party to answer anything, the old scholar had already beaten him to death with a sleeve. On the square, the illusion remains the same. It is still the scene of the long bridge in the main hall and the densely armored ancestral temple under the corridor. The fat immortal wearing a purple official robe like a mourning concubine said, "Is it a gentleman from Guanhu Academy? Also, in this way didn't our brothers hit the tip of the knife head-on?" The tall and thin big immortal looked at the old man in brocade clothes and said angrily, "It's all good things you provoke. The other 3 vain female ghosts who are haunting the nightmare here are far more relaxed than frightened." In the hands of a Confucian gentleman, he was only punished in accordance with the regulations of the academy. It is better to do what you should do than to be eaten by the 2 great immortals. That is the real immortal immortality. The old scholar came to the stove and didn't even look at the girl who was sticking at the door as if she was a door god, but stopped at the door. Lu Qian hurriedly put down his chopsticks, turned his head and said, "Brother Shizhou, after many years, come, let us sit down and drink and talk slowly." In the 2 generations of Haoran Tianxiao and Uwafudi, the bookish scholar in front of him was named Lu and his name was Shizhou. Kaizhou carried away her sorrow and blew her dream to Shizhou. Outside the temple, Qing Tong only felt that Qin Pingon was sitting here fishing. Even if he waited for Lu Xian aside, he could just sit on the ground like this. Qing Tong couldn't help but ask, whether it is a cultivator or a pure martial artist, what's the point of learning that vulgar sun fishing in the water? The point is that Qin Pingon hasn't caught a fish until now. For the temple blessing of Fen Shrine, this pond is just a pond. Qin Pingon held a pole in one hand and pointed at the pond with one finger and said, "But to the old master and you, what is this pond? Stongi's how. So you don't care whether the few swimming fish in it are big or small. It's life or death. The fish in the pond can't escape anyway. Even if there are great monks who leap over the dragon gate, They are like the fallen leaves of the locust tree at the entrance of the temple. I believe there will be a day when the leaves will return to their roots. Qing Tong started to have a headache again and immediately changed the subject with a faint expression in his eyes. How do these ancient gods who are running around, how do they return to their roots? Qin Pingon said, then what if you treat the whole world as a pond? Qing Tong was speechless. Qin Pingon laughed and said, there are some questions, don't think too much, just try to stop, just like the ancients who made poetry to avoid October cold. Qing Tong understood the October cold, that the poet evaded, and was quite happy for a while and finally no longer confused. It was not easy. Qin Pingon asked, if there weren't that earth-shaking change 10,000 years ago, what would your ultimate pursuit be? Qing Tong leaned on the back of his chair, took off the power fence above his head and shook it as a fan and said, I still don't dare to expect to be able to climb to the top and ascend to the platform. I am afraid of death. As in ashes, if you don't have it, you're gone. I'm from a bad background and it's hard to learn how to cultivate. It's so difficult to practice. There are barriers everywhere. Other monks may be a matter of one or two thoughts, but I have to think carefully about it. For hundreds of years, of course, they will cherish the hard-won opportunity more than Xiao Mo and Yang Ji. They dare not do a feat, dare not even the slightest effort. In those long years between the world and the earth, it seemed that from the first Taoist, the next saying began to spread. The sergeant heard the Tao and walked diligently. It was the 10 Hao in the world and there the Taoist not far behind, such as the great ancestor of Tuition, the master of Bixiadong Cave, the demon sword repair Baijing Xiaoma, the old master of the golden core, etc. The sergeant gained the Tao and was ascended to heaven. Guan ranks in the immortal class. It means that by walking up to the 2 ascending platforms that respectively control the male and female earth immortals, they become a brand new of the ancient heaven. The corporal obtains the Tao, the land immortal, and the resident for many years. This is me. This kind of dull qualified gas trainer is the ultimate pursuit in his heart. The ancient Qi practitioners were able to practice Tao. Among the many ascending avenues, the rank of the monk's golden core is similar to that of the monk's golden core. Among the earliest Daoists, there were more than a dozen species such as Xiaoju riding a dragon, Quan Luan riding a crane, and Huahong. After that, there were those who pulled the house and sword, and the shared house sword, and after that there were many relics of ghosts and immortals that soared in the night. After Qing Tong finished speaking, he found that Qin Pingon seemed to have turned a deaf ear to his mind, and his state of mind was still unwavering. Qing Tong felt a little boring not looking at the scroll, glanced at the empty fish basket on the shore and asked, it's just that difficult. Catch the fish? Is the bait wrong or your fishing skills are not good? Qin Pingon smiled and nodded. I'm really not good at fishing. I've been better at one thing in my life. Unless I'm starving to death, I won't eat bait or bite. Being in a long river of time, it's hard not to be caught as a fish by people on the shore. Qing Tong asked again, how are you sure that Master Lu will definitely go to the Lugong Temple site? Qin Pingon looked indifferent and asked, the ruins of Lugong Temple? How did you know about it? Qing Tong was stunned, thinking repeatedly, still breaking his head and not understanding why Qin Pingon had said this. At the Fen shrine behind them, there is still the Imperial Fenglei Palace plaque hidden in the warehouse, and the 8 diagrams pavilion and the dream character tablet on the side of the ghost house in the city, as well as the girl with a 1,000-year-old peony, and her Qian Tong Xian, a Taoist from the side branch of the God sect, and the Taoist name Dragon Tail, and the golden pill ghost suppressed in the secret room by the unique talisman of the God sect. Not all prove that this mansion is where the ruins of Lu Gong's temple is located. Qin Pingon smiled and said, it's not only a game of waiting for the rabbit, but also catching the turtle in the urn. Sort of coming. Chapter 938. The old scholar was at the door and said, the junior Lu Xing paid a visit to Master Lu. The 2 parties reunited after a long absence. One called Brother Shizhou and the other called himself a junior. Because the scholar and the Taoist priest didn't use their heartfelt words, the girl heard it really and her brows instantly frowned. Master Lu taught? Master? Is this young Taoist who claims to be Xianshu Tangshi actually a man of the world? Otherwise, who would dare to establish a religion for the mountain sect? It was just a pure martial artist, but the talisman on her shoulder was so heavy that she couldn't move. Could it be that the family has a deep family and rich wealth and he bought it with the fairy master on the mountain with a lot of money? Lu Chen looked at the girl and nodded. The girl has a good vision, she didn't guess wrong except for a few tricks. Xiaodao is actually a martial artist who does not show the mountains and the water. The phrase Grandmaster is a vocabulary tailored for the trail. The veteran scholar smiled knowingly when he heard this. The third master of Bai Yujing really wrote an article, The Great Master. But the time has changed and eventually it has evolved into the honorary title of Pure Martial Arts. The old scholar walked into the stove and sat opposite Zhou Xian. He had already prepared an extra bowl and chopsticks on the table. Even the jug was 2 jugs. Obviously he was to entertain the reunited deceased in a foreign land. Zhou Xian asked curiously, "How can Sect Master Jiang be willing to let you leave the blessed land of the Cloud Cave?" Lu Shi poured himself a bowl of wine and said with a smile, "I had an agreement with Jiang Shang. After I came here to settle a relationship, I still have to go back and continue to be a punting boat. In the blessed land of the Cloud Cave, the pseudonym is Ni Yunzhan and he lives on a boat. Historically in Huanggeji, one of the 18 scenic spots in Yunkus blessed land, an unknown ancient sword fairy once drank fine wine in the pavilion. In the end, when he was drunk, he hiccuped and spit out a sword pill. At the beginning, Cui Dongshan and Lao Zhouzi were in the boat crossing the river. The words of the 2 sides and the constant fighting, all revealed part of the identity of the other party. One is that the blue ox alone visits the jade fault, but leaves the yellow crane to guard the golden pill. One is the old dragon of the ancient Shu kingdom who Xingjun drinks wine and persuades the dragon to go for it. The old master Hao, who is aliased as Ni Yuan Pin, was a monster in the Jade Pu realm that even Jiang Shangzhen was helpless when he was drunk. It feeds on the aura of heaven and earth. Lao Zhouzi, however, was able to use his unique magical powers and mysterious swordsmanship to defeat the monster by the Great Avenue, and finally beheaded it with a single sword, which was tantamount to erasing a confidant worry for Yunku Jiang's family. Lu Chen asked, "Mr. Shizhou has never seen the girl from Sui who walked out of the picture scroll? If the poor memory remembers correctly, girl Sui was in Yugui's ancestor before becoming the true ancestor of Aquarius. She has been practicing on the mountain for several years, and she is only 1 step away from Mr. Shizhou. Why don't you meet your master and disciple? Wouldn't it be a good talk on the mountain if you could renew the old bond and restore the status of master and disciple in the vast world?" Lu Xing shook his head and said, "The predecessor and the predecessor, if you can stop in this life, you will stop, otherwise the next life will be a mess. When is the end?" Lu Chen sighed and screamed, "Listening to the enlightenment of the monarch, I have awakened so many dreamers on the mountain." Lu Xing smiled and shook his head. Zhouzi talked about the sky and Lu Chen talked about dreams, they are all unique. Lu Chen lifted the wine bowl and shook it, his face was full of sadness and his eyes lamented. When it comes to accepting disciples, the poor are ashamed of themselves. Those unsuccessful disciples, so far no one has been able to get the best in the world. People's name makes me, a master, not popular wherever I go. Look at the old scholars, even if they are in the Qingming world, in that Xuandu temple, they are still my own children. Lu Xing couldn't laugh or cry. How could the number 1 person in the lotus flower blessed land be compared with Haoran? Lu Xing would never dare to wear the top hat taught by Zhang Lu on his head. Which of Lu Chen's direct disciples is not a master of Dao Fa? Just say that Chao Rong and He Xiaoyang, who stayed in the awe-inspiring world, are all fairyland that is expected to soar. In the lotus flower blessed land in the Guandao temple, in addition to the host of Bixiao Dongzhu, there will occasionally be distinguished guests similar to the real person of Chunyang, and there is also the Tongis Hao exile Immortal, who has set aside to go to the blessed land in Hongqian to practice the heart of Taoism. In addition, the blessed land itself has no shortage of talented and amazing people. If it were not for the old masters to deliberately gather the spiritual energy of the heavens and the earth, and not allow the vulgar to practice, it is estimated that it will be like the Friazu spiritual blessed land, or the Jiang Shangzhen cloud cave blessed land. Early a large number of earth immortals have emerged, and in the history of the Uefuti, the pure martial artist who is recognized as the closest to the way of heaven is actually a woman. Sui on the right. She is a predecessor who can be highly respected by Hushan school Yuzhani. The world is turning around, ruling the roost in the arena, winning the title and going round and round in the view of the extremely high-spirited Yuzhani. It is just a ghost hitting the wall. After all, it is impossible to escape the ordinary quagmire. Fui right is different. The woman back then, flying up with swords, handed out 3 swords towards the sky. Sui right-hand origin in Uefuti is actually quite good, a bit similar to the later noble son Zhou Xian, and her elders in the family are not illiterate, so how can she be so perfunctory on the matter of naming her? Of course, there are experts who have high hopes for this Sui rite, hoping that she can find a different way and not be the same as the common people. The rite on the right of the Sui dynasty was opposed to the Handan Dao's Ren. And the scholar who claimed to be Lu Xing in front of him was the evangelist of Sui rite in the blessed land of learning, martial arts and swordsmanship. As one of the protagonists of Huang Liang Yiming, Lu Xing of course, hopes that his disciple Sui rite will be able to make a difference in the future and walk out of a road different from himself. There are few pedestrians on the Sanqing road and the side door is fighting to get in. The world has many divergent roads since ancient times. It is hard to see the gods. Lu Chen took a sip of wine, broke off a greasy chicken leg and said vaguely, Pan Dao thinks that Sui girl will not have low achievements in the future. If I am Shizhou brother, even if it violates the old master's arrangement, I also want to give the golden pill to Miss Sui. With this help, Miss Sui Great Sword Fairy will be in her bag. If her luck is better, the fall of the lotus root flower in the early years will be the origin of the world. What we couldn't do back then can be made up in the future. Lu Xing said helplessly, if Master Lu interprets words in such a way, it would be a little bit suspicion of mechanically copying. Because the word Sui, if you don't talk about the origin of the surname, just follow the Confucian temple Shouhu. The ancient meaning is the sacrifice left after the sacrifice. If you sacrifice, you will hide the Sui. So there are sages to add annotations. The corpse sacrifices the lungs and the spine of the millet. In addition, according to Su Fuse's Sheng of Zhaoling characters, the Sui character has a meaning of Twiluo. Lu Chen smiled and said, really? Sui right side of the sword failed to ascend, and its shape was pierced and the ashes disappeared. Doesn't it look like the first corpse of the lotus flower blessed land? It is precisely because of Sui right move. It was only then that Yu Zhenya's ambition was later to turn from martial arts practice to mountaineering to cultivate immortals, determined to accomplish the unfinished feat of his predecessors. Eugenie really admired Sui right side. There was once a self-deprecating saying that all the heroes of the world are all ministers under the skirt. To say that in history the martial arts realm is higher than that of the right side of the Sui dynasty. It is not that there is no one, but there is really no one who has to compete with God on the right side of the Sui dynasty. You lotus roots if you must select the top 10 masters in history. Lu Chen can say a few words to put the coffin on the whole lotus flower blessed land in the past, except for Ding Ying, who is a master of martial arts in the world, in addition to the 4 people who were brought out of the blessed land by Chen Pingon, plus that Eugenie, who doesn't talk about martial arts at all and runs to the mountains alone to cultivate immortals, can be among this list. The 4 people in the picture scrolls around Chen Pingon, including Sui right, were in different dynasties, and they were the veritable number 1 person in the world in Awafu. Wei Xian was unable to find immortals and eventually died of old age, but he still lived to be 120 years old. The demon leader Lu Baixiang died in a siege. Zhu Lian, the lunatic Wu. He begged to die, and in that city he almost killed all the 9 out of the 10 people in the world. In the end, Ding Ying, who was young, was lucky enough to get the silver lotus crown on Zhu Li's head. On the right of Sui, she did a stunning feat of unprecedented, soaring with the sword, drawing half of the world's martial arts in one body, like an immortal sword soaring into the sky, but unfortunately she failed to truly break the unbreakable. The bottleneck of heaven's path. After she handed out the incomparably bright 3 swords, she actually fell into a tragic end that melted flesh and bones, and the bones fell into the world, and then the bones turned into dust and it disappeared in smoke. After that, the way of heaven cannot be violated, as if it has become an iron law for future generations of martial arts. Until Ding Ying appeared, and Eugenie, the first fairy man who practiced mountaineering in the true sense of the blessed land, appeared. Lu Xing smiled and nodded. There is no controversy. Lu Chen said, according to their respective peak strengths, Brother Shizhou, how do you think the top 3 rank? Lu Xing shook his head and said, it's been too long since I left the blessed land. I haven't seen the shots of those heroes with my own eyes. Lu Xing dare not make comments. In fact, Mr. Lu in front of him can certainly occupy a place among 10 people, and the ranking will not be low. Maybe he can be among the top 3. It is worthy of the saying that swordsmanship powers the gods, otherwise he would not be able to teach a direct disciple like Sui right hand. In fact, Lu Xing had to take a step ahead of his disciple Sui right in the matter of fighting with Tian Wenjian, But he was not as eye-catching as Sui Right, because he was playing with the old master of Sui Wenjian. As for the end, there is no suspense. Like Sui Right's side, he lost his physical body. After the defeat, he had to wear in a feather-robed crane cloak, which is what the old man described as the skin. After that, as if to make up for his merits, he followed the decree of an old view of the Lord, left the lotus root's blessed land and came to Tongyi's Hao, and the incident of Lu Xing's rising is quite a bit of fragrance in the wall, just like a criminal officer. Hao Su had soared from his family's fortune with a sword back then, and the movement was so great that in the land of Daquan dynasty's Jiangyi, because of this fairy relic, a prefecture was named as the Crane City. The local people passed word of mouth that there was once a fairy riding here. Crane soars. The so-called fairy trail is actually a small mountain bag. There is still a popular nursery rhyme in Jingfang of Daquan City: whoever rides the blue bull, the yellow crane flies again. After that, Lu Xing was ordered to go to Yuguazong and live in seclusion in the blessed land of Jiang's cloud grottos. He ferried the old boat who earned a few snowflakes and guarded the golden pill hidden among the cliffs of Huanggeji. And this one, the old master of Jindan, was once a Taoist friend of the old Guanzhou in the ancient years, and the latter often visited Bixiadong and landed at the treasure beach to discuss Taoism with the old Guanzhou. Lu Chen said, "It is your first to use pure true energy to fill the sea. As for heal and gourmet, it is also the number of qi refining ways you first explored." Unfortunately, Sui Right Hand got your personal biography. God, the future generations of Eugenie are only the gods, because the books you left behind, the right side of the Sui dynasty deliberately cherished them back then, but they did not destroy them, but less than half of them fell into the hands of Eugenie. Lu Xing took a sip of his drink and his expression was bleak. I searched through official history books and some barnyard official histories and finally found out that in all dynasties, it seems that the banal of foreigners has come. Some people have changed their temperament, some people are appearing out of thin air and rampant in the world. I came to a conclusion that since there are people outside, there must be heaven outside. The so-called Dao soaring in ancient books and ranking in the immortal class may be a joke, such as where I am. The world may be a secluded mountainous land that no one cares about. I didn't know that I was one of them, and I was quite sad about this. I wanted to go out and have a look. I was reluctant to go to martial arts and gave up halfway. I had to silently explore the way and then look for the one closest to the so-called cultivation embryo in the book. Disciple. But in the end it was nothing but a basket of water. As a Confucian student practicing Taoism and immortality, participating in Zen and Buddhism, all three things failed. Otherwise, how can Sui Right Side say that he has given up martial arts and turned to practice so he can really become a swordsman at once? Lu Chen nodded. With regard to the integration of the three religions, the first person who thought of this path was the head teacher Bai Yujing, Lu Chen's senior brother Ko Ming. This is also the reason why a small group of monks on the top of the mountain in the Qingming world feel that the Taoism of the Great Head sect seems to be incompatible with the Buddha's law. Xing Juzhong, Wu Shuangjiang, Lu Xing in front of him, Lu Yen with the name Pure Yang, and Qin Pingon now. In fact, on this avenue they all have their own attempts. Of course, there is Qi Jingchun, who is one of the best in Lizhu Cave, who has gone the farthest and highest. Lu Chen put down his chopsticks, rubbed his chin, glanced at the girl at the door and finally peeled off another dried lychee and threw it into his mouth. In the logging yard before, I had a small chat with Lin Jingqing, who was the magister of the Lizhu Cave sky. Qi Jingchun guarded a Lizhu cave and chose to bear the catastrophe by himself. This incident fell in the eyes of the Zhongtu Confucian temple, which was a bit similar to Bai Ye's later journey to Fuyao with a sword. Generally speaking, it can be persuaded but cannot be blocked. Even on the Buddhism side, Qi Jingchun's attitude during that catastrophe was far less aggressive than the immortal Bai Yujing Zikulu. At that time, the family of three religions that prevented Qi Jingchun from shouldering all the cause and effect was actually only on the side of Bai Yujing in the Qingming world. To be precise, it was Yu Dou and Lu Chen, the two leaders of Bai Yujing, who are temperamental, mindful and act. A pair of brothers with very different styles, the attitudes and positions of the two sides on this matter. It is rare to reach a consensus. It can be described as extremely clear. There is no room for it. Because they are worried that this is Qi Jingchun's break and then stand. Once it succeeds, it will be a way of proving that it can teach the ancestors. Lu Chen wasn't worried that Qi Jingchun's realm would become even higher. For Lu Chen, let alone the 14th realm, even the 15th realm, what does it have to do with me? But Lu Chen didn't want to just watch one thing happen, that is, the big brother who started a big fight with Qi Jingchun, so the big way was cut off. This means that the thing that Lu Chen hoped for the big brother to help him verify fell through. In the opinion of senior brother Yudo, once Qi Jingchun was the first to get the job done, it would be equivalent to Bai Yujing no longer having a master instructor and no senior brother in the world. The brother Ko's name for him has the grace of accepting apprentices on behalf of teachers and teaching careers on behalf of teachers. Therefore, before Lu Chen left Bai Yujing, Yudo almost warned his younger brother in a warning tone. Lu Chen, if you dare to hesitate at the final moment, I'll do it. Afterwards, Lu Chen said that he didn't do anything. How to fool Lin Jingqing who can fool others, let alone fool Chen Ping, and Lu Chen only felt sad. He picked up his chopsticks again and muttered to himself, cultivation is a matter of breaking the sky, which is a Nanti visitor. The girl at the door squinted. Lu Chen smiled and said, what do you think? The girl sneered, there are not many people in the world who are qualified to speak such big words. Then being poor is for big brother Sun Guanzhu, Zhao Tianshi and others. Lu Chen smiled and said, right, hidden officer? Lu Xing was shocked when he heard the words. A sword repairman in the Jade Pure Realm, his Dao heart was shaken and he hadn't seen him for a few days. So does Qin Pingon have this knowledge of Taoism? Can you hide in a certain place and watch the mountains and rivers from a distance, leaving yourself unaware? So, the third head teacher of Bai Yujing in front of him, has he known it a long time ago? Deliberately hiding it from yourself. Glancing at Lu Xing, Lu Chen looked embarrassed and promised. The sun and the moon can be learned, the conscience of heaven and earth. This matter has nothing to do with the poor road. Is it considered as digging a hole to bury yourself for temporarily lending to the young hidden official of the 14 realm Dao Fa? This matter today, if the Taoist son who was watched by the Xuanti knew about it, it would be fine and he wouldn't be able to laugh at himself for hundreds of years and thousands of years. Lu Chen converged his expression, rare to be so serious, picked up a pair of chopsticks and gently knocked on the tabletop. The table that was struck by chopsticks had ripples like running water, like a dream, true or false. Lu Chen took a deep breath. I don't have wet shoes when I often walk by the river. It's terrible, it's terrible. The girl at the door seemed to be smiling but not smiling, raised her hand and lightly flicked the talisman on her shoulder, and the talisman fell to the ground. She took a step back and her figure gradually dissipated. At the same time, the entire site of the Lu Zhu temple outside the kitchen room, as if there were hundreds of millions of tiny gaps, also began to fading. Little by little, restore the original appearance of the real mansion. The three-headed female ghosts, the wild cultivation of the mountains, the fighting methods, the inviting gods to the gods and the great immortals, all of them are illusions and they simply don't exist. It's like someone wrote a story carefully for Lu Chen. Lu Chen laughed bitterly. Didn't the poor Wei get a dart for nothing? On the bank of the pool outside the Fen shrine, Qing Tong suddenly stood up from the bamboo chair and tremblingly said, what did you do before I went out? Qin Pingon was still sitting on the bamboo chair, maintaining the leisurely posture of fishing with a rod, and slowly said, I didn't say that just now, let you watch the water temporarily. Qing Tong shook his head and said, impossible. Even if you can fool me, how can you fool Lu Chen? One accident. Qing Tong began to call the name of the third head teacher of Bai Yujing. Even in this vast world, Lu Chen could only walk the world with the ascending realm cultivation base. But Lu Chen is Lu Chen after all. What's more, like the Wuya mountain monarchs who traveled around Sui Shan before, as well as the Shuijun Li Yeho, he could perceive the existence of dreams almost instantly. Li Yeho once stood on the boundary between true and false dreams and traveled casually. Then the whole dream was torn apart. Could it be that Qin Ping An's previous visit to Shuijun Li Yeho and his visit to the 5 sacred mountains of Middle-earth to worship the mountain tops had already given a secret act of respect? It's just that the more Qing Tong thinks about it, the more it feels impossible. Not to mention Master Lu, only that Lu Xing was also a sword repairman in the Jade Realm. He only said that Lu Xing was in the Lotus Roots. He was originally a scholar of heaven and humanity. Lu Xing strayed into the mansion. After that, just glance at it casually. Even if it is the kind of casual glance, it will still be subtle and deep in memory, and if it is wrong you will notice the clues. Before and Qin Pingon traveled together to visit various dreams of water houses and mountain tops, but forcibly dragged the various landscape gods into the dreams, and there was no extra thing. But in the old Lugong temple site, Qin Pingon had set up the female ghosts, monks and the 2 great immortals in the temple, as well as the 2 rows of swordsmen and soldiers in the corridor. The most important thing was them. They need to talk to themselves. And every time they speak, every action and even every heartfelt voice, they need to conform to their identity, realm, and even their Xianxia. In addition to those buildings that appear out of thin air, all the landscape needs to be carefully crafted in the subtleties, and the grandeur is in line with the geography. This means that in addition to being a storyteller who is good at composing stories, Qin Pingan needs to be a master builder, painter, calligrapher, and even women's clothing and accessories who are proficient in repair and civil engineering. Qin Pingan smiled and said, "Do you think the images you see in the pool are what happened right now? Even if you have deceived you? Besides, you think that you have deceived you really only the water picture scroll? Why don't you turn your head? Take a look inside the Fen shrine." Qing Tong turned his head and glanced at the shrine. Suddenly a look of horror appeared on his face, and when he looked around there were no anglers anymore. Qing Tong sat down on the floor. Because the bamboo chair that Qin Pingan handed over is also fake. The real Qin Pingan, standing in the corridor of the hall with his arms folded, surrounded by the little Taoists throwing coins to play, but the Taoists and coins are like frozen pictures. The most terrifying thing Qing Tong felt was not this, but it was like a picture scroll slowly spreading out, and the long river of time seemed to flow again, and there was a ringing sound on the side of the moon cave gate in the temple. Walking out of the two women, the woman is still in a bun with Chao Yin, and the girl is still in a light green skirt with a lotus root and white shirt. She is stepping on a pair of slightly old embroidered shoes, and the old woman in the temple who wears a bamboo leaf robes, walks out of the moon gate together. The girl is still the same. He looked at someone from the corner of his eye. The only difference was that Lu Chen stood beside the former Qing Tong and replaced Qin Pingan. I saw the young Taoist priest wearing a lotus crown with two legs like nailed eyes dazzling and finally calmed his mind, then he moved aside and let the three women pass by, still following the two women and girls with different looks. The Taoist muttered silently, "Tao is pear blossom or not, Tao is apricot blossom or not, white and red, don't have the Eastern style." Then Qin Pingan spoke in his heart, "Lu Shen." These two words, the Qing Tong in the shadow of the willows outside the temple, are clear to the ears, and their complexion changes drastically if struck by lightning. Because Qing Tong had asked who was waiting before, at that time Qin Pingan just say, "Lu Shen." Lu Chen turned his head and gave a strong, "Oh." Then Pai Dian ran to the corridor of the hall, hurried up the stairs, smiled brightly and said, "It is another dream that has spent a lot of merit and it is also a sacrifice to life. Flying swords also need to consume golden body fragments, and even more effort on those details. The poor Wei will have to worry about the capital for the hermit. It's a loss in the old Lugong temple site which has less than the number of hands. Dummy. Once the word 9 is passed, then the cost of dream creation by the hidden officer is probably not as simple as doubling hard work, very hard work. Great, really great." Lu Chen turned around, squatted on the steps, wiped his face with his sleeves. "Okay, please enter the urn, catch turtles in the urn, 1,000-year-old tortoise, Baba." Lu Chen said bitterly, "If this is spread, Pang Dao will have no face to go out and go out." Qin Pingan smiled and comforted, "I don't have any wet shoes when I walk along the river and am used to it again and again." Lu Chen raised a hand, "Don't. Poor Dao doesn't want to have a second time. The king is in the urn like a dream and the king is in the urn when he dreams." Qin Pingan just borrowed a place to build a big urn and let Lu Chen step into it on his own initiative. In the long-abandoned mansion in the city, there are actually few things they are genuine. But in a sense all the words and deeds of those female ghosts, wild repairs and ancient gods are absolutely true. Especially the girl who was made from 1,000-year-old peony, only said that she took the initiative to walk to the door of the stove and was close to Lu Chen, and all her words, expressions, voices, all kinds of mood swings, all heartstrings, the voice, especially the story she compiled. Which word, which sentence is not true for herself? Of course to Lu Chen it is true that it doesn't matter at all, that's why he takes it lightly. Otherwise, in the several worlds apart from the three teaching ancestors who set the game himself, Lu Chen, let alone strayed into a dream with Lu Chen's temper, it is estimated that Pakistan would not sleepwalk a few times. However, as a bystander, Qing Tong feels that his scalp is cold and his back is cold. Because it was like a big exam, the test paper was given, the answer was also given, and even the comments were given together, but Qing Tong still failed to understand all the joints. Just talk about this dream trip that I thought of as a tour of mountains and rivers. How many new ways did Qin Pingon or Mr. Zheng figure out? Lu Chen raised his head, looked up at the standing green shirt guest and asked with a smile. I implore the hidden officer to help solve the puzzle. Who is it that shields the poor heaven's heart? If he hadn't lost the first move like this, Lu Chen would think that he would be stupid and slam into the dream world, and he wouldn't be aware of the impropriety so late. Qin Pingon smiled and said, It was the most sacred master who asked me to see off the guests and send out the teaching ceremony of Lu Zhang. Lu Chen suddenly realized that. He hurriedly stood up and hurriedly hit the gate chief with a sincere expression on his face and muttered, The courtesy is heavy, the holy master is so polite. The little master can't do this kind of activity. It is really possible for the most sacred master to do it. Lu Chen sighed. Qin Pingon, shouldn't this kind of killer's skill at the bottom of the box be revealed so early? Are you afraid that the poor Dao will spread this thing all over by Yujing? Qin Pingon said, It's a rare opportunity to practice hands. I missed Master Lu today. Where can I find a monk in the 14th realm? Lu Chen stood on tiptoe and waved vigorously, Friends of the same Daoist Qing here and here. Qing Tong had no choice but to bite the bullet and walk into the Fen Shrine, but he didn't use the magical powers of Shudi Mountain and River. This kind of fairy fighting, which seems to be high in the sky, can easily hurt the pond fish. Lu Chen and Qing Tong explained with a smile. If it weren't for the strict rules of the Confucian Temple, I would only be allowed to visit the mountains and rivers of the 2 continents. Otherwise I would definitely go to the town demon building before fellow Daoists don't mind. Qing Tong looked cautious and said, Of course I don't mind. The little road boys in the corridor began to throw copper coins again, all thinking about playing innocent, innocent and innocent. The 2 women who came here to respect the incense also got on the carriage, and the old coachman yelled softly, and there was the sound of the wheels outside the temple. Holding a jade-wishing old woman from the temple, she returned to the shrine with a smile on her face, and added a considerable amount of sesame oil money to spend a good year. The shrine and temple will be celebrated next year when the spring begins. Can be done more generously. When Miaozhu saw the 3 pilgrims on the other side of the stairs, he nodded to them. The 3 in the corridor and the old woman also nodded in return, especially the young Taoist priest wearing a Taoist crown, and said with a smile, It is a good sign that pilgrims will come here to respect incense. The incense of our Fen shrine next year will definitely be indispensable. Hearing that, the old woman was in a good mood and her expression became more kind, nodding and smiling. I wish the fellow Taoists all the best. After Miaozhu entered the Moon Cave Gate, Qin Pingon said, The Xianxia mountain has better results than I expected. Sure enough, Master Lu is still very sophisticated in doing things. Lu Chen said, Huang Zhongho is a good drinker. Next time I return here I must find him for a drink. Qin Pingon nodded. Lu Chen asked, What are your plans next? Go back to see the most holy master? Qin Pingon said, I may not be able to see it. And I plan to go to the Huangliang sect first. There is a ceremony there and someone has already rushed over here on Luapa Mountain. It's impossible to wait until the day of the ceremony, but it's all in the dream. Lianghua, there is no reason not to go over and say hello. Lu Chen rubbed his hands and smiled. Do you mind if you want to join in the fun? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Whatever you want. Qin Pingon said, Then Zhangjiao Lu can get rid of the dream? Lu Chen blinked. Qing Tong is dumbfounded. Lu Chen stomped lightly. A Fen shrine actually disappeared. Qing Tong is already numb. Whatever you 2 toss about next. Qin Pingon said, It's almost ready, a dream is a dream, refreshing and refreshing. Lu Chen waved his sleeves again with a smile on his face. The 3 people in the corridor were still in the corridor outside the hall of Fen Shrine. Qin Pingon turned sideways and kicked over with a kick. Lu Chen jumped to the side and laughed. When Lu Chen's feet settled, the 3 of them had already arrived in the dilapidated mansion, just outside the small building. There were 3 coffins in the building. There were no dead bones and nothing inside. Lu Chen stood outside the threshold, folded his hands together and said, Coffin, coffin, promotion and wealth. In fact, Yamashita Market has absolutely no taboo about coffins, and will never feel that it is a bit unlucky. Otherwise, many elderly people in wealthy homes will not prepare a coffin for themselves early. As for the homes of the emperors, almost all emperors and monarchs will choose the address of the tomb before they are alive, start the construction and prepare for the future. Qin Pingon said blankly, As long as Master Lu doesn't lie down, Master Lu will have no place. Lu Chen turned a deaf ear. Qing Tong was silent. The old scholar came here, smiled and shook his head, looking helpless. Qin Pingon held a fist and apologized. Master and I, how offended it is. And I, Yuan Pin or Lu Xing, smiled freely. Mr. Qin is so skilled, not to mention that there is no treacherous storm. It can be regarded as an unusual mountain journey without spending money to watch it. Revolving lantern. Qin Pingon smiled and said, it's no wonder that Master Ne is a lot of courtesy when he is a junior. And I Yunzhan jokingly said, then the Taoist masters have the final say. Lu Chen's face was covered with the word grievances, and on the side of the master who was invited to enter the urn, the master of the urn, I didn't see Master Hermit that you were so polite and thoughtful. Lu Chen looked around, overgrown with weeds and lifelessness. He looked at it as if it was not as good as the previous dream. He couldn't help turning his wrist and sighed. Good times are like birds turning back into a story. Seeing this scene in this life, this body here and now is not a heart. Dressed in a green shirt. The return of the 5 sacred mountains was spotless, and the hundreds of cities were all empty. Lu Chen suddenly said, Qin Pingan, we met for the first time back then, is that count? Oh hello, poor words are too poor, how can this be good? Qin Pingon smiled and said, Master Lu wanted to say, we met 2 young boys for the first time? Lu Chen clapped his palms and smiled. I have never dreamed of going to Longzhou in my life. In front of Qingshan I met 2 teenagers for the first time. Qin Pingon said, it turns out that good poems don't rhyme. Qing Tong and Lu Xing looked at each other and they felt pity for the same illness. Why did you drink at the same table with Lu Chen? Why would you follow Qin Pingon? In the evening at the gate of the Huangliang school. There is a long table with pen, ink, paper and inkstone on the table. Responsible for recording the names and mountain tops of the guests watching the ceremony. At the same time, it is also necessary to check the invitations and customs, which of course is to make a scene. Several visitors with strange faces came. The monks of the Huangliang school are not the kind of small sects with shallow eye sockets. Generally speaking, they can be recognized by the distinguished guests from the nearby hills and the surrounding countries. The head was a young man in a blue shirt and long coat with a gentle expression. I always feel that this person looks familiar, and the more I look at it, the more familiar. Next to this person was a woman wearing a power fence and a green robe. An old man in a Confucian shirt, and a young Taoist priest wearing a swimming fish crown, looked a little bit ridiculous. When walking he liked to flip his sleeves. It was the young Taoist priest who stepped forward quickly and first gave out a gift, 2 Guyu coins, and then the first one to write down the pen and write his name. The view of the gods, the Taoist priest Lu Fu. The young Taoist priest has not forgotten to add the 4 words in teeny lower letters, which is a degree of reward. After that, the 3 visitors who came together to congratulate each other also took out 2 grains of rain money, and then wrote the name and the top of the mountain. Tongis Hao Shindu Mountain Kiching Qing Tong. The blessed land of Tongis Hao Cloud Grottos. Guest Qing Ni Yuan Pin. Luopa Mountain, the owner of the mountain Qin Pingon.